world is changing. The world does not change on its own. People are the ones making the world change onto good or onto evil. But we want you to make the changes onto good. Welcome to Early Exchange on Soup. My name is Ayo Jimmy. How do you intend to change the world for better today? Let us leave the world better than we met it. Okay. It's a very busy day once again because ideas are flying all over the world and people are exchanging values and getting values in return. It's an ecosystem of value exchanges, and that is why we are here to intimate you of developments in the world, in the global market. How are you doing this morning? Yes, we are a news organization, like I always say, and it is news first and foremost. So let us join Blessing. In case you're wondering where she is standing by in our news studio to give you the news update around the world. Blessing, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning, Ayer. I am very well. Thank you for joining me on the news update. From wherever you're watching, I am Blessing AG. Good news are rare these days, and every glittering ounce of it should be cherished and hoarded and worshipped and funded like a priceless diamond, according to Hunter Simpson. So get ready to maximize the most recent economy and development updates in the world. Let's take a break before we get right into the news. Now we'll start with Nigerian developments. The Ogun State government, under the leadership of Governor Dakpo Abiodun, has implemented several measures to alleviate the impact of the fuel subsidy removal in the state. These measures include providing 10,000 naira cash palliatives to public servants and pensioners, house allowance for health personnel, peculiar allowance for public servants, release of promotion letters, payment of leave bonuses, and cash backing for pensioners, gratuities. The ministries, departments, and agencies are to work out modalities of ensuring that 20% of Tamang public servants, hair staff strength are off duty daily to ease the effect of recent increase in fuel price. The government will also provide food palliatives to vulnerable individuals, establish food distribution outlets, and create a commodity exchange for the agro-allied sector. Additionally, the state will introduce electronic motorbikes and tricycles, convert mass transit buses to CNG, and acquire new CNG buses to reduce transportation costs. Road infrastructure, interventions, and support for micro, small, and medium enterprises are also part of the government's efforts to address the economic challenges caused by the removal of fuel subsidy. Similarly, Kwara State Governor Abdurrahman Abdurrazak approved a monthly palliative of 10,000 naira for workers to help them cope with the recent fuel subsidy removal and its economic impact. The governor also directed a staggered work schedule for civil servants, introduced hazard and skipping allowances for medical personnel, endorsed immediate cash backing or promotions for certain workers, extended free bus rides for students of tertiary institutions, and activated the Kwara State Social Investment Program (QASIP) to support petty traders and MSMEs. Additionally, the government will receive fertilizers and grains from the federal and, of course, the state and local governments. These are to boost farming output and food security in the state. A committee will also be set up to address extortionist tendencies and the pricing of foodstuffs by marketers. These interventions aim to show empathy and provide support to the people of the state during this challenging time. The Osun State Police Command has prohibited commercial motorcyclists, popularly called Okada riders, from wearing hoods and face masks during operations in the state due to increasing complaints of robbery, sexual assault, and other criminal activities allegedly perpetrated by these riders. Spokesperson for the command, Yemisi Okpalola, announced that the police would arrest and prosecute anyone found wanting in this regard. She has advised members of the public to desist from boarding motorcyclists who wear hoods, nose masks, or face masks. The ban aims to address the issue of crimes committed at night where culprits escape unidentified due to their concealed faces. Nigeria and Benin Republic have come together to streamline multiple taxes on transit cargoes along the ECOWAS corridor. The move aims to enhance border trade, foster economic integration, and combat cross-border crime within the region through sharing of intelligence and joining of resources. The collaborative efforts were unveiled during a working visit to Cotonou by the Acting Controller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, NCS, Mr. Adewale Adeniyi, under the bilateral agreement. Both countries pledged to harmonize their import prohibition policies, will make any goods banned in one country to be prohibited in the other, ensuring a consistent trade environment and facilitating smoother cross-border transactions. Both Nigeria and Benin Republic have also committed to holding regular meetings twice a year to address matters of mutual interest and ensure effective collaboration. Reactive, the joint committee responsible for monitoring trade and transit relations between the two countries, and revive a consultation framework involving the private sector to create a conducive business environment for both nations. During the meeting at the Nigerian Embassy in Benin Republic, the Nigerian ambassador, Mr. Olukayode Aluko, expressed a desire to achieve a Nigeria-Benin joint commission by the end of the year, solidifying their bilateral relationship and unlocking new business opportunities. Moving on, as part of a measure to stop the spread of anthrax from nearby Suleja, Niger State, into the FCT, the Federal Capital Territory Administration is targeting 1 million cattle for immediate vaccination. The Plateau government is also set to begin vaccination of 4.3 million cattle to curb the spread of anthrax in the state. In Niger, the acting secretary of the Agricultural and Rural Development Secretariat, Ishak Sadiq, disclosed this development during the commencement of the vaccination exercise at Pekon Kore Grazing Reserve, Gwagwalada, Abuja, noted that vaccination is the most effective method to halt the spread of the disease. He has urged livestock owners to cooperate closely with veterinary health workers to ensure the success of the vaccination program. The exercise is planned to be carried out simultaneously across the 62 wards of the territory within the next 4 weeks. Similarly, the chairman of the Miyetti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria, FCT chapter, Yahaya Isa, expressed the community's readiness to cooperate with the officials during the vaccination exercise. In Plateau State, Dr. Sipak Shes, the director of the Plateau State Ministry of Agriculture, while addressing newsmen in Jos, said that the state government has already bought 200,000 doses of vaccines. Away from Nigeria, but still in Africa, Burkina Faso's health authorities have granted approval for the use of a new malaria vaccine on young children, offering hope for saving millions of lives. The R21 vaccine, which has already been approved in Ghana and Nigeria, is seen as a crucial tool in the fight against malaria, the leading cause of infant mortality in Burkina Faso. Successful trials involving 5,000 children have paved the way for the vaccine's use. The R21 vaccine will be administered to children aged between 5 months and 36 months, with each dose expected to cost a few US. Serum Institute of India can produce 2 million doses annually, and a new factory is planned to be built in Ghana, which, like Nigeria, has already approved the vaccine's use. The use of the R21 malaria vaccine in Burkina Faso brings hope for a healthier future, reduced disease burden, and improved well-being for the country's young population. Gabon has launched Africa's first debut for Nature Swap, planning to buy at least $450 million of its government debt and convert it into eco-friendly blue bond. This move aims to fund conservation efforts in the country, which is home to the world's largest population of leatherback tortoises. In debt for nature swaps, a country's debt is purchased by a bank or investor and replaced with cheaper options, with multilateral development banks providing credit guarantees. This allows the savings to be used for environmental conservation. The deal has been anticipated, and it's reported that the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation will provide political risk insurance for the swap. Similar initiatives have been seen in Ecuador and Belize, with Ecuador pulling off a record of $1.1 billion debt for nature swap in May and freeing up $18 million annually for the next 20 years for conservation of the Galapagos Islands. Another African country like Sri Lanka and various islands in the Caribbean and Indian Ocean are also exploring debt for nature deals. The African Development Bank and the European Investment Bank are interested in providing credit guarantees for such initiatives. Bank of America is reportedly assisting in orchestrating the Gabon deal. Nelson Mandela Bay in South Africa's Eastern Cape is set to become home to the world's largest green ammonia plant. The plant will use renewable energy to produce ammonia, a vital fertilizer and potential fuel for the shipping industry. The project, led by Hive Energy Africa, is projected to begin operations in 2026 with an estimated cost of $4.6 billion. The plant will be powered by a nearby solar farm and will source its required water from a local table salt factory that desalinates seawater. The project aims to reduce carbon emissions and create up to 20,000 jobs in the region. Green ammonia's applications extend beyond agriculture, offering promising prospects for sustainability. The market for green ammonia is projected to grow significantly in the coming years, with the current market reportedly standing at $36 million, and it is to reach $5.4 billion by 2030. This initiative signals a major step towards a greener and more sustainable future for the region and beyond. And away from Africa, India's ban on rice exports has caused concerns among UAE retailers who anticipate a 40% initial price surge for the commodity. The situation is expected to be temporary as new suppliers from Vietnam, Thailand and Pakistan will fill the supply gap for non-basmati rice. India was a major rice exporter, accounting for over 40% of global rice export last year. The ban has led to a reduction in rice availability in the UAE market, potentially causing higher prices and supply constraints. However, experts believe that prices will stabilize and the situation will normalize once new seasons start and supplies return to normal. In the meantime, UAE retailers may rely more on other rice producer countries, and there could be an increased demand for basmati rice as the resident shifts to this costlier staple food. Dubai's Roads and Transport Authority (RTA) has announced the resumption of the marine transportation line via Dubai Ferry connecting Dubai and Sharjah starting from August 4. The service had been suspended since 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but with the situation improving, authorities have decided to bring back this vital transport link. The marine transport service will operate 8 daily trips from Monday until Thursday, which is weekdays, and 6 trips from Friday until Sunday, weekends. This Dubai ferry service is the first of its kind that connects Dubai with other Emirates, specifically Sharjah, providing a convenient and scenic route for commuters and tourists alike. The ferry service will run between Al Ghubaiba Marine Station in Dubai and Aquarium Marine Station in Sharjah. This joint effort is made possible through cooperation between Dubai's Roads and Transport Authority and its Sharjah counterpart. The decision to resume the service is part of the broader strategy to improve mobility choices between the two Emirates, alleviate traffic congestion, and promote safer maritime transports. Getting out to China less than 7 months after his appointment, Qin Gang has been removed as China's foreign minister, with Communist Party Foreign Affairs Chief Wang Yi taking over the role. Qin's prolonged disappearance from public view and the lack of official explanation for his removal has sparked speculations among nations, including the US and UK. President Xi Jinping signed a decree authorizing the move, and Wang Yi was appointed as a new foreign minister by China's top legislature. Additionally, economist Pan Gongsheng has been named as the replacement for the outgoing central bank chief Yi Gang, who has reached retirement age. As the head of the central bank, Yi Gang played a crucial role in shaping China's monetary stance and managing its financial system. Pan Gongsheng's appointment may lead to changes in China's monetary strategies, interest rates and regulations, which can have significant effect on the country's economy and the global financial landscape. International observers and markets are closely monitoring how the new officials shape policies that impact trade, investments, and financial markets both within China and globally. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Russia to reevaluate its decision and return to the Black Sea grain deal, which allowed for the safe export of Ukrainian grain. The proposal comes as a response to Russia's termination of the agreement a week ago, citing unmet demands concerning its own food and fertilizer exports and the insufficient distribution of Ukrainian grain to the neediest countries under the initiative. In an effort to salvage the situation, Guterres had previously written to President Vladimir Putin on July 11 with a proposal suggesting that he extends the deal with a daily limit of 4 ships traveling to Ukraine and 4 ships departing, contingent on connecting a subsidiary of Russia's agricultural bank, Russia Cobanks, to the SWIFT global payment system. Reconnecting Russia Cobanks to SWIFT has been a key demand from Russia as it was cut off by the European Union in June 2022. Speaking at the UN Food Systems Summit in Rome, Guterres warned of the repercussions of the terminated Black Sea Initiative, stating that the most vulnerable populations would bear the brunt of the consequences. The withdrawal of Russia from the deal has triggered a surge in global wheat and corn futures, impacting food prices worldwide. Germany's economy ministry has announced a substantial commitment of approximately 20 billion euros to boost the country's semiconductor industry over the next few years. The move comes amidst growing concerns about supply chain vulnerability and reliance on South Korea and Taiwan for chip production. Under the EU Chips Act, Germany has successfully attracted global chip makers to establish factories in the country by offering attractive subsidies. The act aims to double the European bloc's share of global chip output to 20% by 2030. Adding to the country's progress in securing chip manufacturing facilities, the German ministry revealed that Taiwanese semiconductor giant TSMC has expressed interest in investing in a semiconductor production facility in the country. The ministry is actively engaged in discussions with TSMC to finalize an investment decision. And then finally, Canada's passports has been ranked as the 7th most powerful in the world, according to the Global Passport Ranking by Henley and Partners. This ranking is based on the number of destinations Canadian passport holders can visit without a prior visa. Singapore took the top spot with access to 192 destinations. Canada's passport outranks the United States, which came in at 8th place. In 2014, Canada held the number 2 spot, but it has since dropped in rank. The recent redesign of the Canadian passport aims to enhance security and prevent counterfeiting. Canadians will soon be able to renew their passport online for added convenience. Of the countries sitting in the top 10 of the Henley Passport Index, the U.S. has seen the biggest fall in ranking over the past decade, plummeting from 2nd place to 8th. Singapore, by comparison, has improved its rank by 5 positions, moving up to the number 1 spot. In May, officials announced Canadians would be able to renew their passport online starting this fall. And as the morning news updates for now, follow Sick News on social media for more of this, and stay tuned to Early Exchange for deeper analysis of some of the stories. I am Blessing AJ. Thank you for watching.
Welcome back, and thank you, Blessing Ichi, for that news update. Okay, let's go to the front runners. Like you know, I said yesterday that it's always a busy day for the media. We are never tired, we're never idle, and things are always happening for us to discuss. And so I have with me my co-discussants, or do I call them co-panelists? One of them just finished taking the news, dear Blessing Ichi. Let me say a very warm welcome to you this morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Oh, I like that. And of course, the analyst, the specialist, Idahosa Osamanze, good morning.
Hi, good morning, blessing, good morning. Good morning, our viewers.
I won't take your title away from you. You are the Director of Policy and Research for African Development Studies Center, which is based in Abuja. And of course, they have presence in other parts of the world, as we mentioned some other days ago. Okay, we start again with the resident doctors who are once again on strike. How does this?
Here, it doesn't feel well at all considering the impact it will have on the health sector, because when you go to public hospitals, most of the doctors you find there are resident doctors. It's not very easy for you to get to see a consultant. So when resident doctors go on strike like this, it greatly impacts the health sector. And I think this is one strike too many, not just for the health sector, but for Nigeria. But talking about the health sector particularly, I think it's high time the government have a very deep conversation with them and attend to the issues so that we don't go back and forth on this, because when you don't have resident doctors attending, some patients could die.
Of course, definitely. Before you wade in on the issue, it's a dilemma for me. We all know the importance of the medical profession to the general well-being of the nation. We all know the effects of the down tooling at any point in time. I may not be too wrong if I say medical doctors or resident doctors are probably one of the very few professionals in this country that embark on strike more than any other profession. There are people who have other reasons to go on strike. While I want to say that maybe their claims are legitimate because they're talking about, okay, they want this one-on-one replacement policy for healthcare workers and so on and so forth. They have a list of, conditions that they have listed out. And these conditions are always increasing by the day. When you try to meet one, others will come because, of course, I know that labor relation is always a continuous thing. You keep making your demand as long as you see that there is need for improvement. But then, when you look at how important their service is to the nation, and for every day that doctors down to several lives are gone, that speaks to a high sense of responsibility on them, or we should expect that from them. We can't say they should not go on strike, but it also, we seem to be at a deadline. We're back to that table. We had this discussion some weeks ago.
You see, it's so unfortunate that in this part of the world, people go into profession, and the whole idea of being in profession is just to make money. Because if you look at it, the bottom line here is all about money. All these other things that are listed around it is just to give kind of a weight to the actions. You see, in other climes, medical practice is driven by a deep philosophy to save life. Every time you go on strike, the lives that you are claiming to save, you're actually destroying them. And this is the real issue that faces us as a country. Why we place demand on government, sometimes I also want to feel, can this union too also be a little reasonable in terms of putting demands on the ground? You see, because all these things require government to spend more money. We're already talking that government is borrowing so much money. We're already talking that, of course, we are not generating enough revenue. I think strike should not be the first option to even industrial disputes. It's also to see it from the point of view of those who are in government, also to see, is there so much money to spend that we are not actually spending? And some of all these issues could actually be also issues that are within the purview of what government itself can handle. But for us here, we have to strike the balance.
Yes, we should.
Government has to negotiate.
See, you spoke about value earlier. You mentioned the fact that, yes, it's about what is the philosophy driving their engagement in the first place. When we were growing up, you will be told by your parents to go and study medicine or probably study engineering or some profession because of the perception that you are in it for money. It seems those in the practice of medicine, okay, we have to look at the take home of an average medical doctor in Nigeria as compared to the take home of any other worker elsewhere. Of course, they will tell you that what about the cost of training a medical doctor in Nigeria? Others go to, the argument in different parts of the country is that others also spend money to get trained for whatever they do. And if you are saving lives, others are making some other savings for the country. The ones handling our education system, for instance, without them, you can't become the doctors you are today.
Of course.
If teachers decide to go on strike as frequently as doctors do, what happens to the school system? Let us imagine the Nigerian army going on strike. With this same frequency, what happens to our security architecture? What happens to those who are actually holding us, safe and secure? They endure very, very stressful conditions out there. They are the ones who lose their lives on a daily basis. Many of their wives are becoming widows. Many of their children are becoming orphans. Yet they hardly go on strike. As a matter of fact, what they have signed on to, if you go on strike, it is seen as rebellion. You will be punished for it. You really can't do that because you have signed to do it for the nation. I think we need to be more responsible as professionals, whether in the medical field or any other field.
Well, even before we put the blame on the resident doctor, what is government doing to make conditions of service good for them? So there wouldn't even be need for strike. Now, I think if government attends to demands on time from any sector, whether it's from ASU, whether it's from the resident doctors, it won't lead to strike. They use strike because they know that is what government understands.
Yeah, but you see, Blessing, we understand that we are underpaid.
Everybody is underpaid.
The military, they are underpaid. The police, they are underpaid. Custom, they are underpaid.
Journalists are underpaid.
Everybody is underpaid. We know. Why are we underpaid? Because the size of the pie or the cake is small. That's the reason. Now, government need money to be able to actually meet these burgeoning demand of public service. Now, put it together. The overhead of government is taking over 80% of our annual budget for less than 5% of the entire population. In other words, only 20% gets to the rest of us who are not public servants in terms of the configuration. Now, what are they asking for? To borrow more money to pay them more salaries? And if these borrows are done, who will pay them back, or where do we get it from? This is the challenge that faces us, and that's why we talk about responsibility. That if you have to go on strike, yes, also look at the situation on the ground in terms of finances. If the money is there and you are not getting it, they are two different ball games. They say, okay, we are making so much money for government, but we are not remunerated very well. But now you are doing almost a social service, which is free, that does not bring in sufficient income to even maintain your facility that you are staying on, and you are putting so much pressure on government to pay you as they are paid in the UK.
So
what that means is that you have to put more taxes on companies,
definitely,
which is the source of revenue. You have to take more tax from the workers that are already underpaid to be able to maintain the kind of lifestyle people are asking for. This is why people need to be really considerate so that we can have a robust environment where people look at what are the issues, what is rational, what can government do in the interim to be able to mitigate some of all these challenges.
So let's talk more about money, because
it's about money, essentially. It's about
the reason for the strike is money. So the Central Bank of Nigeria has reaffirmed its commitment to gradually phase out the old 200 naira notes, 500 naira notes, and 1,000 naira notes while issuing new currencies. Looking at that, how much of the new notes have you seen in recent times, are you? Because it seemed like we have more of the old notes, and the new naira note is just in trickles, so to speak. So how will this happen? Are they going to print more new naira notes to be able to effectively phase out the old naira notes?
Well, I like to believe the fact that this is just a statement meant to make us feel better, really. Because I'm not seeing the new
Better
notes.
exactly.
I'm not seeing any new notes. The last time most of us handled the new notes was probably during the cash cash crunch, and probably shortly afterwards. Of course, you get to see it in trickles here and there. When you say you are gradually phasing out old naira notes, that would mean that, okay, every time you go to the ATM point, for instance, you would get new naira notes or probably a blend or a mix of both the new and the old. And then in my last 10 transactions, I have not been given a single new naira note at the ATM point. Even when you patronize POS operators, you still have the old naira. So what is the speed of the phasing that we're doing? If that is just a question.
It's going to be gradual, really. It's not something that had to be done ASP, you know, because it's also involved money itself. They are not printed for free. The cost of printing one note is also very expensive, and especially because of the security features that are in there. And we also know that the capacity of the printing and minting company really to deliver the volume of currency that we need is also limited. So of course that calls for the gradual phasing out. Putting some in here, we can still be managing them. Like the president said in his inaugural address, that both of them will run side by side as his tenure lasts. So whether it's the new naira or the old naira, as long as both are legal tender, I don't think that should really bring worries to anyone. But what is for me really fundamental in this issue of the new notes is that I would have advised CBN, if it is possible, to tone down the printing of higher denominations of naira, 500 and 1,000 naira notes.
Why?
The reason is very simple. The real motivation for people stacking money in the house is because the denominations are high. If you go to other countries of the world, especially in Western country, you can see euro 100 naira. You hardly will see a 200 euro note. You hardly will see a 1,000 euro note. If you've been to the US, you can see 1,000 naira dollar or $200. The maximum you see is $100. So because the real motivation for people stacking money, taking them out of the purview of CBN control, is because they have denomination. You just can put 10,000 in your pocket and it's not showing. So they should tone down printing high denominations and concentrate on printing lower denomination so that we can have money, we can actually enforce our cashless policy
and prevent money
stashing at home. That for me should actually be it.
Okay, I hope that the gradual phasing is actually gradual and takes a very long time, that enables the circulation of the new naira notes so it doesn't put pressure on people. We don't return to the era where it was very difficult to come by cash. Now, moving now to something that's another matter, going to Africa. Now, Gabon has launched Africa's first debt for nature swap, planning to buy at least $450 million of its government debt and convert it to an eco-friendly blue bond. How smart?
Well, it's a green world that we have all subscribed to, whether intentionally or you have to just be part of it. Because if it is not green, what color can it be? So yes, if it is not green, what color can it be? Now, when private investors are now buying government debts, okay, and they are investing in the green economy, I think it's a two-way thing. One, it relieves the government of the burden of debt, and two, the environment benefits. And when we say the environment, we mean people who live in the environment benefit. So for me, this is a good effort by Gabon. And Gabon is not alone. Other countries of the world, I learned that Ecuador is also part of it. Now the question is, when do we start that here? Not because we want to copy, but if we have to copy, let's copy something good. In Hausa.
Well, I think, you see, it's a business model, I feel, for the people who are involved. And they have what they're targeting. But it's also for us to also read between the lines how the society eventually benefits from this. that some people's future are not being mortgaged. Yes, why talk about green and building our ecosystem? We must not forget that we also have responsibility to make sure that we are not selling the future to private individuals.
I do know that there is no free lunch even in Freetown, like they say. Every favor you get, for every favor you get, you lose a measure of freedom. There's always, you always exchange values, like we said earlier on the show. Okay.
So that wraps it up on this segment. Take a break. When we get back, we will be looking at the minister list. So let's take a break now and be back to that.
It's almost 60 days since President Bola Tinubu was sworn into office. Nigerians eagerly await for the names and profiles of those who would fill his cabinet and help drive his renewed hope agenda. What caliber of men are we to expect? Here is what some of the people think.
I'm not really expecting much, to be honest, because so far it has not been so good, really. But obviously, For me personally, I just believe that the cabinet should, should help him. Let me just say it's just helping hands, really. It's not as if those set of ministers or the cabinets are coming to alleviate the poverty, the existing poverty, or what has been going on in the country, really, per se. So, really, my expectations are not really high.
I feel like Nigerians should be positive. I feel like they should have, you know, good expectations for this for this government, to be honest, because to change Nigeria won't be easy. Nigeria was ruined for 8 years, so the process is actually not going to be. It's going to take a lot of tough times, but we should just try and stay positive and work with the government to make everything better.
My expectation about a ministerial list is very, very and superlatively high. I don't want and I don't expect as usual, in the sense that in the time past, you see some nonagenarian, octogenarian being brought to the cabinet, making the cabinet in order to kind of compensate them, maybe for money they spent during the electioneering campaign, or maybe by virtue of loyalty. So this time around, I expected young, vibrant, focused personalities, regardless of where you come from. It doesn't make any meaning to me again. People based on pedigree, who can perform, who has performed, and, well, we have avalanche of human resources in Nigeria who should be able to make the ministerial list. I want to believe, Mr. President, based on his pedigree, I am not a card-carrying member of any political party, but based on his personality, based on his pedigree, especially what he has done in Lagos before, between 1999 and 2023, and 2003 rather, I want to believe this time around, he should be able to bring it to bear on the nation as our president.
Welcome back. The opinion of a Nigerian there as they await the list. Talk about David and the king's men. We know what they did in the Bible. Now people are asking, Tinubu, who will be your men? So we can talk about Tinubu and the president's men. Of course, it was in the news last night that in the next 48 hours, the president is reported to have said that the list will be sent to the Senate for confirmation. Let's not forget, nomination first, then confirmation by the Senate before portfolio assignment, and so on and so forth. So today, we are taking a deep dive into the mechanisms of making appointments, I mean ministerial appointments. What do we have to look out for? What caliber of people are meant to fill those important spaces, because they are the ones who will actualize the president's policies. It is one thing for him to make policy statements in his office in Aso Rock. It is another for people to get it done down here, and those are the president's men today. We're talking about the much awaited presidential list of potential ministers. And I am not alone. Blessing is always here, like you know. And of course, Sam Orowuje. But before I go to Sam, Blessing, who are you expecting, apart from me, on the list? Yes. Look.
Well, that's if your name has been nominated by the president. Well, I'm expecting brown pegs and brown holes. My concern more is about portfolio assignment, because after the nomination confirmation by the Senate, and then they take oath of office, will go on to the portfolio assignments. Sometimes you find that some persons assign portfolios that you feel like, oh, this person, based on their antecedents or based on their qualifications, they would have done better in other ministries. So I think more importantly, besides the assessing the educational qualifications, asking them questions at the Senate, because even at that time, during the screening at the Senate, a lot of them do not even know the portfolios. for which portfolios will be assigned. And so the questions that they are asked sometimes are not portfolio based, they're more generic. So I think that is one area that we should look at. So I'm looking at people who will be experts in their area so they can be very effective.
Okay, so let's bring on Sam Orowuche, who is the Director of Policy Research and Development for Femi Watch Limited. Let's not forget that Femi Watch Limited are the owners of Sook News and Watch Radio. Sam, if I had my way, I probably would give you a ministerial nomination because you look like one of them. All right. Good morning, welcome aboard.
I don't think I have the preparation yet to be a minister.
No, you'll be prepared later. Once we appoint you, you'll be prepared.
Thank you very much indeed for having me. Ayo and blessing.
Okay, let's look at what the law says about who to pick, because there are legal provisions in our constitution about who qualifies for the post of a minister, any portfolio whatsoever. And one of the conditions is that, okay, it must be appointed by the president and ratified by the Senate. We know that. Then there is one that appeals to me here. It says a person may be appointed as a minister. This is section 149. I'm adapting it as amended. Now, a person may be appointed as a minister if they are a Nigerian citizen, one, are qualified for election as a member of the House of Representatives, and of course have the ability to speak and understand the English language. Now, what are the implications of you being qualified to be a member of House of Reps? Does it speak to the fact that you must understand the lawmaking process and so that you can be in tune with people's needs? Let's start from there. How do you interpret that?
I'm not a lawyer though, but from the face value of that provision, I'm thinking that they are looking at the foundational requirements that enable you to be a member of House of Assembly of a state, by extension, a federal lawmaker. So the minimum threshold in terms of entry qualification, I think that's what that section speaks to.
Yes, my question is, what is the significance of that to being a minister?
No, what it means is that at least you can read and write. Essentially, that's the surface value of that, unless I didn't get what you said. They say you must
be qualified, as in to be a minister, to be appointed, you must have the requisite qualification to be a member of House of Reps. The way I see that is that, okay, yes, it means you must be familiar with the lawmaking process, and because these House of Reps members are meant to be the ones that interact with us at the grassroots level, you must understand how to really flow with your people, because you can't really be an effective minister until you have an understanding of the needs of the people.
Yes, I think it speaks to character and also quality. Because when we want to elect people to represent us, there are certain characters, there are certain qualities that we look out for. Does this person have what it takes to represent us? So because that of the position of a minister is by appointment, it shouldn't be that you lack everything that is required to be a leader. You lack what it takes to be a public office holder. You lack what it takes to oversee ministries. So you're just handpicked. You must have those abilities, or you must have those qualities first. So that's why I think that requirement is there. So if we were to elect, if you were to run for office for a position of maybe a representative, you have what it takes for to be picked or to be elected for. Yeah. So you're not just handpicked because somebody knows you, but because you have what it takes to occupy a sensitive position as the head of a ministry.
Which speaks to being qualified beyond academic qualification, because, yeah, you might be ratified and certified by academics, but if you're not certified by the people who you will represent, then you may not be effective at that job. That's what I think about it. I think I agree with that on that. Okay, let's go on. Let's look at the nomination process. Of course, we know that it is the prerogative of the president to nominate. But then he owes us a duty to be very transparent and be accountable to ensure that we have best qualified individuals, the round pegs you spoke about, yes, in the round holes. How does the president ensure that he is transparent enough in this? Of course, he will not be there when he'll be making the nomination. But by the time we see the nomination, we'll see how transparent he is with the process. We will see how accountable he is to the people. If you were in his shoes, what would you have to do to ensure that, okay, when your list is out eventually, you'll be seen to be very transparent and be fair to all sides, that constitute this country?
Thank you very much. That is a very difficult call, particularly in a country that is so large with a lot of political interest. So one of the challenge for the president normally is to meet with some political considerations in terms of the appointment. However, based on his own pronouncement, that is ministerial list forced on his agenda that they must be competent people, driven by strong character and ability to perform and deliver his priority in office. So political considerations are essentially one of the elements that determine who becomes a minister. So there's a politics and there's power contestation of who become a minister. However, the president has the constitutional mandate to choose his men based on that provision. So, but the public is expecting so much based on competence, capacity to deliver on the priority of the president.
Considering this, what are the challenges of ensuring that there is competence and also ensuring that the cabinet is representative of the diversity of the country?
Yes, there's a
competence and also ensuring that there is balance in terms of representation of diversity.
No, the Constitution has already spoken to that minister must come from the 35 states or 36, including Abuja. So that has been taken, that is a diversity in itself. So that has been taken care of. But who comes from those places must be driven by competence, capacity, compassion, and courage to deliver on government policies.
Okay, we know that the Constitution allows that a minister can be appointed and reappointed. Okay, now should there be a limit to how many times you can be reappointed? Because we live in a country of over 220 million people, and a lot of people are qualified. If you look at these requirements of law to hold one office or the other. Yes, we know that when you want to make appointment as a president, you have those who are in your political camp, you have those who are your loyalists, you have those who you perceive to be good enough on the job, and you make appointments at your own will. Of course, they are subject to confirmation. People are saying, okay, can we have a legal framework to ensure that, okay, you can only serve maybe one term or serve for a number of years, so you can allow more people to participate? Because yes, if two good heads are better than one, then 1,000 good heads might be better than maybe 500. What about that? Is this possible? We look in that direction and say, okay, there's a limit to how long you can serve as a minister.
In my personal view, that might be a difficult call to make at this particular point in time. The point is that the president or the leader has the prerogative to choose those he chooses to work with. So he cannot legislate on who becomes a minister or who becomes a commissioner or who serves in a public arena. So it's at the discretion of the appointing officer. So if you have the capacity to deliver value for the appointing officer, then you can be appointed as many times as possible. So that's like head hunting, who will deliver value. But there's a provision that people must come from the 36 states or the federation. So that has been taken care of. So if you become a minister maybe 2-3 times and you have the capacity to deliver on that value, I think it's something that we cannot really, in my personal view, now that we can legislate on. So because that prerogative is domiciled with the appointing officer.
In screening, where does experience come to play? What is the role of experience? You find that when some ministerial nominees are before the Senate, some are grilled more than others. Some are just asked to take a bow and then they leave, but others are more screened. So is experience that you've been in one ministry before and then you're getting another appointment, is that, should that be like what we're looking at? So if this person has occupied a position before, you don't screen the person much, even if the person will be assigned to a different ministry. Experience.
Yeah, I think experience is important, but for this current administration, we would like to suggest that the portfolios should go into the Senate for approval so that people can specifically be grilled on specific ministry. That's a proposal, though that's not the tradition, but we think it's important that they should assign portfolio. But what is important is experience is there, the capacity and the competence to deliver for the person that is appointing the ministers. So that's one of the major considerations that we must take cognizance of. Oh. So capacity, experience, whatever what they call technocrats around here is important, but who is appointing who and what is the minister coming to deliver? So in terms of agenda setting, in terms of public policy delivery, these are some of the issues that we need to highlight more so that we can really set an agenda, focus agenda. We have timelines, deliverables and milestones for the minister so we can track their performance based on the respective ministry. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, if you the video we saw, the short interview we saw before the segment began, the man there was talking about he is expecting the president to appoint young Nigerians, maybe younger, let's use the word younger Nigerians, and make it like, okay, maybe a mixture of the old and the not so old. Is age a factor here? I know that there are 70-year-old children and there are 17-year-old adults, okay? Whether take it literal or take it contextual. Yes, there are 70-year-old children, there are 17-year-old adults. What is the rule of age in cabinet composition? Granted that all of them are equally experienced. What has age got to do with it?
No, if we look at it from the perspective of inclusive governance, there's a need to have a blend of the old to deliver value. So age essentially, in this regard, is not really important, you know. What is important is your competence and capacity, and emphasize those two words, competence and capacity to deliver. In addition, you must have compassion for the people that you want to serve. So those are essential elements. So, but we say for the president to have an inclusive governance structure, there should be a blend of the old and the new so that we can carry everybody along.
I can't help but laugh thinking about what you said, 70-year-old children and 17-year-old adults. Yeah. That's quite funny. But let's talk about gender. Assignment of portfolios based on gender. We've seen from the time, since 1999, we seem to have Minister of Finance that are female. It seems to be a trend. One female Minister of Finance leaves, another female Minister of Finance emerges. Is that a way to go that certain portfolios are assigned to a specific gender?
I'm not too sure about that, but I think it's just coincidental that in the last few regimes we have had ministers who are female in the finance portfolio. I just think that it's just coincident that they were assigned to those portfolio. Nevertheless, they had the capacity and the competence, and I think they delivered on those values. So, but I think it's neither here nor there, in my view.
Maybe it's an attempt for us to fulfill the mandate of the 35% affirmative action that has been said time and time again in the country. Well, on a very personal level, I think women are good managers of finances. They run the homes. And if you can run the home successfully, why not? Why not run the nation's economy? That's just on a latter note, on a personal level, so to speak. But then, let's look at even the thinking behind nomination. Most of the times, when the president makes nominations, he picks from the people he knows. Take, for instance, if I were to nominate people now, maybe for Minister of Stomach Infrastructure, maybe I'll pick Blessing. Because I know her, I have interacted with her. Now, in politics, there is need to reward loyalty also, and that comes into play when you're making your nominations. But then you have to balance that with putting square pegs in square holes. How do you strike a balance as a president with that task of, balancing, rewarding loyalty, political loyalty with, ensuring that, yes, the right people are put in place? What are the parameters you have to, use to ensure that it is easy for you to do? Because it is not easy, because you have people calling on you at every point in time. We gave you this one when you were contesting, now we want this. How do you manage that particular dynamics?
No, the dynamics can be managed. As a leader, you already know your priorities, what you set to achieve as a president. So political considerations are there, but in spite of those political considerations, you still have the element of competence, capacity. So you must have a minimum benchmark on how you want to choose those that want to work with you as your first line, like the ministers. So it's important that why political loyalty, political rewards are major elements in terms of how you choose people that want to work with you. But the issue of competence and capacity remains central. And as a leader, you should be able to spot those people who have those competence and capacity to deliver value, because you are as good as those who work with you.
Definitely.
And you're as good as your leader. So I'm sure that the president would make those right choices in spite of political consideration, the political reward system, and be able to strike a balance between those elements that we just spoke about earlier.
Taking it from you're as good as those who work with you, what measures should be in place to strengthen the ministries, departments, and agencies? So it's not just about the minister who heads that agency or ministry, but the workforce, the way the ministries, departments, and agencies are run, so that there's continuity. Because we find that when a new minister takes over, sometimes some projects, some legacies of past ministers are abandoned. And so there seems to be a gap before things begin to take shape. How do we ensure that continuity, that institution that gives a strong support system to the ministers?
I think first and foremost is that each ministers that are appointed must have their respective objective for those ministry in line with the presidential priority of what he has said to be his agenda. Two, the bureaucracy must be aligned into those government policies that are strategic to the current leadership. Therefore, bureaucracy must align themselves in line with the priority of the government. So when they're designing policies, they must understand that there are some priority that the current president wants to deal with. So they must align with government objectives and priorities, and bureaucracy must run effectively in line with the various objectives of ministries, departments, and agencies of government.
Okay, thank you, Sam. The conversation continues. We have looked at general terms, the general conditions for appointing a minister or for qualifying for a particular portfolio. We'll go on a very short break. Now, when we come back, we'll talk about the specifics. What are the requirements of filling a particular portfolio itself? And that is another exciting part of the conversation. Please don't go anywhere. We are yet to tackle this fully. welcome back. We are still continuing with the conversation about the appointment of ministers, even as we expect the list from the president to the Senate to let us have an idea of who will run the affairs of the ministries, departments, and agencies in the next 4 years. Earlier on the show, we spoke about general demands of appointments of qualification, but let's look at ministries. There are at least 43 ministries and departments in this immediate administration. Okay, we have, all of them are key and they have their respective roles. So we want to just zone in on maybe 2 or 3 of them, Blessing. So we look at what caliber of people are we expecting to fit those roles so that we can have the square pegs, like you said, in the square holes. Blessing, let's start with.
Yeah, I like the fact that you mentioned that all of the ministries are key, because
Definitely.
what we seem to, the assumption seems to be, oh, some ministries are more critical than others, but having the understanding that all of them are key helps us in selection, or helps the President, the Senate, in selection of who heads each ministry. So there are different ministries in Nigeria. We have several of them, from Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development. We have Aviation, Budget and National Planning, Communication, and Digital Economy. We have Culture and Tourism. We have Defense and Environment. We have even Aviation and so many others. Now, we'll be joined by, again, by Idausa Osamanze, who's Director, Research and Policy, African Development Studies Center, ADSC. So, sir, let's look at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So what are the specific experience that the potential appointee should possess in international relations and diplomacy? So should this person be someone who perhaps has been in the diplomatic career before? What exactly should we be looking at?
But I think Foreign Affairs Ministry is a very unique ministry that should be handled by a core professional and somebody who is versed in international relations, understand how international politics work. The person must understand diplomatic practice. It should be somebody who is versed in a whole lot of negotiation, because, like they say, foreign policy of a country is the extension of its domestic policy. And it's not just to be, it also must be aware of what the domestic concerns are and how to actually present the nation to other nations of the world. And apart from that also, there's also a whole lot of leadership skills that is required, because such a person is also the one who will have to manage all our embassies and high commissions abroad, relate with the staff, and because we're already very notorious in most of our embassies where a lot of Nigerians complain about how they are treated and things like this. So there's also a lot of people's skill that is required for anybody who should occupy that exalted office.
Okay. Whoever will occupy that office that is that exalted should have a clear vision and be able to articulate a strategy that will, advance our foreign policy interest abroad. Now, we are playing, when you talk about foreign policy, we are playing with, let me say, smarter countries in a particular context, and you must be strong at the table of negotiation to be able to, have your say and have your take. Okay. What should we look at? How do we assess the level of articulation required of that office holder to be able to, fight for us, quote unquote, on the national stage?
Well, I think, like they say in politics, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies. What is constant is permanent interest. I'd also believe that a minister should have his own vision. Really, his work is an aid to the president, and what is expected to do is to actually champion the vision of Mr. President in terms of relating with people of the world. So such a person must have at the back of his mind that the era of non-alignment is gone. in international politics.
Can you explain on that?
You see, during the 1960s, 1970s, in the 1980s, Nigeria pursued this policy of not aligning either to the West or either to the East, because there were two powers, the Axis power and the Allied powers. So what we did was to form an association of third and developing world countries who said, oh, we're not going to be aligned to anybody. We want to be indifferent. In politics, nobody can be indifferent. What is uppermost in the heart of every man who is going to play out there is to see, where do I get benefit from? And that's what is important. What is important to your country's development? You see, some years ago, and I think it's not even 2 years ago, and I think this was about 2 years ago, in the UAE, there was this concern of buying Tucano aircraft from America. And when the 5G technology came, of course, UAE discovered that the Chinese company, Huawei, was better off in terms of technology than the American company. And so they said, well, we will buy 5G from the Chinese company. And American government said to them, if you buy from China, we won't give you Tucano. They sat down around their cabinet and they asked themselves, who are we actually fighting? We're not fighting anybody. What is critical to tourism for us is a better internet. We want to operate a good and 5G that is functional. And they said to America, well, you can keep your Tucano. We will buy the technology. Because that's quicker to us. And I think that's how Nigeria should play. And you can see the ruler of Dubai going to Russia, even in the midst of the whole issue. Because grains are coming. It's not about what America wants you to do. It's about what is good for your people. And that was why I love Donald Trump. Why he was in the president in Washington. And he said in his first address at the United Nations, I am the president of America. Be the president of your own country. You see, because when you align to a particular bloc, when there is offering coming from this or your side, you don't want to take it. And that happened to us in 1960. At independence, Russia wanted to come and build our own steel industry for us for free. And because we were chasing a policy of non-alignment, we said no to Russia. That contract was given to France, who later subcontracted that thing to Russia. And that is why up to today, Ajax Steel cannot work.
Okay, if I may cut in there, yes, you spoke about non-alignment being a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Don't you think alignment is a call for polarization of the world? Are we not talking about unifying the world globally?
No. What I mean, the world cannot be. There's no way the world can be united, because in politics, what is important is interest of the nation. America don't just go out to go and fight. America is protecting its own domestic interests. So any policy they pursue is about America. It's American first policy. So it should be a Nigerian first policy. So wherever we can find help, whether it's with the enemy of America or within America themselves, we must be able to negotiate. So we must not cherry pick and say, because this person is here, if America will descend. No, we are a sovereign nation. We should have the right to make our choice. What is important is that you see what's going to advance the cause of the welfare of your people. What is going to be in the best interest for your own country in terms of negotiating, not out of empty stomach, negotiating with pride. And to say, this is what is good for our people, this is what we pursue. That should be the position of anybody who becomes the foreign minister for Nigeria. So you go out there to say, look, this is about Nigeria, this is what we can get. And if this deal is not good for us, then we get to where we can get it better and cheaper.
Coming to finance now, we're at a time where revenue is low and Nigeria is heavily indebted. So what are the qualities should we be looking at for a Minister of Finance? Because we need someone who can help manage Nigeria's finance, know what revenue or know what finance to allocate to certain sectors of ministries of the country. What should we be looking at?
Well, I think also the Ministry of Finance is also very critical because YCBN manages the monetary policy of the economy. The Finance Ministry is actually in charge of the macroeconomic management. And we already know where the president sits in these whole issues. The president wants an exchange rate that is market-driven. The president wants a tax regime that is industry-friendly. Remove all multiple taxes so that industry can breathe. Because if industries are not breathing, the poor people cannot breathe. And that's the truth. And so we need a person who is sound really in this area, because you see, the real problem here is just that you have people, because we have a spoiled system kind of administration where we feel, oh, just employ anybody, he will be on top. His own is to manage people. And you discover that the civil servants who are professionals, they are the ones that are actually managing the person. So if you have no idea of the options, the theories that are out there, you can be misled. So we need a finance minister who will be able to actually harmonize the macroeconomic indicators here at the present and manage them such a way that both the monetary and fiscal policy of Nigeria is working hand in hand.
Okay.
And it's also very important for us to know, because if you have people from different philosophical dispositions, they will not merge. You know, like they say, parallel line, you know, they never meet.
They never meet.
You see, if you have somebody with orientation of modernization and another person with an orientation of dependency theory, for example, you see, two of them will be pursuing two antithetical policies that will grind the nation whole goal of building prosperity. Because the man who is from dependency school don't want to deal with the World Bank, because he feels that those are your arch enemy. Now, the man who is from the modernization school feels that the problem is that if you don't take the World Bank policy or IMF or the Bretton Woods institutions policy, we cannot survive. Now, if you have two of them, that the person in the World Bank and in the CBN is pro the Bretton Woods institutions, and the person in the finance ministry is anti-Bretton Woods. We saw that in the regime between Soludo and Okonjo-Iweala. In short, recently Obasanjo made a mockery of it and said he always was enjoying their fight because they would never agree. So if you don't have a president who is able to moderate that fight, it will grind the macroeconomic stability of the nation.
Okay.
So you need people of same philosophical disposition who can be speaking the same language and understanding themselves, and they will be able to manage the economy and drive it to prosperity.
I guess that's why the president is said to be the chief headhunter for the country, because it's a huge task to get people of equal alignments. Now, let's talk about the track records of someone who will occupy, let's say, the Ministry of Education, for instance. Yes, we know we have a lot of issues in our educational system, and that calls for somebody with clear vision that can articulate the way forward. We're talking about underfunding in universities. We're talking about dropping quality of education. We're talking about graduates that are not employable or underemployed here and there. What should be the track records of someone that would appoint as the Minister of Education, that we can say, yes, this is a round peg?
Well, again, I think it's also a matter of getting a person, a competent leader, really. Leadership is what is actually required in this direction. It has to pull a whole lot of people together again. And these are driven by people who have studied that institution to know what the challenges are. Because the real problem here is that most of the policy that is driving education in Nigeria is not coordinated. Thank God that the president have a PA now who is going to oversee that coordination of policies. Because this is a problem. So you have a war between the polytechnic and the university system. And this is because we have not really understood why polytechnic in the first place and why university. And what balance should we strike? But you see, even on the floor of the National Assembly, people are talking about how do we equalize polytechnic and university. If they are supposed to be serving the same function, why are they created separately? You see, there's a philosophy that drives this technical-based education and the universal-based education. And now, those who go to polytechnic are not designed by philosophy to be managers. Okay. They're supposed to be line staff. People who actually can work with hands-on experience. Those who go to universities are supposed to be managers. This is the way it's designed, and this is where it works everywhere. So if you don't have somebody who understands the philosophy around education, management, and then you put him there as minister, Polytechnic will be dragging him, university will be dragging him, College of Education will be dragging him, and he himself will be in a confusion. But if you have somebody who understands how this system should run and put him in the saddle, he will be able to say, this is where we are going. Going forward, this is what should drive us. And we also need a minister of education who will have guts to address this issue of over-duplication of university. NUC should be made to stop to grant licenses, whether to private university or to create new public university. They are not needed. There's nothing that says in the whole world that every Nigerian must be a graduate. Nothing. I think what is important for us is to see how do we actually make education qualitative such that they can be funded. We are having mushroom private university now without structure. And then they come to the public university to borrow staff for accreditation.
Yes.
And then these people who are doing multi-tax for private university, and they are also teaching in public university. And the whole system is bastardized. If people don't have competence, and I don't see the reason why we should continue to issue license, and these are issues, we need a minister who has a gut to be able to look at issues in their faces and speak to them and create a clear direction where Nigerian education should focus. That, for me, should be the criteria for choice.
Let's come to the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. During the former administration, we had the president as the Minister of Petroleum Resources, but we had the Minister of the State for Petroleum Resources. So what should we be looking at? What caliber of person, what skill set should we be hoping to have in the new Minister of Petroleum? And there are particular areas this person should focus on as it concerns the Ministry of Petroleum Resources.
You see, one of the philosophy that has actually undergirded the president become the Minister of Petroleum is the fact that it was key to the revenue generation of Nigeria. And I think with the liberalization of the downstream now, and a whole lot of NNPC now is a limited liability company, as it were, that burden shouldn't be there. But again, you would also need the person. But I think it's even good for us today because we are having a president who has been in that terrain. Having worked for ExxonMobil, he should understand how the ministry or what should happen in that industry.
So you would make him, you would suggest that he becomes the minister for petroleum resources.
Even if he's not the minister, he will be able to oversight what's happening in the petroleum sector.
But why would you need to
based on his
oversight
experience,
if you have a reliable hand?
Yeah, but you see, it's just, you see, ministers are supposed to be advisor to the president. Because the buck stop on the table of the president. What the president does is that appoint people who come to give him reports of what is happening in the various sectors of the economy and what they feel should be done. And those things will not be done without the presidential approval. So, but the point I'm making here is that you are having somebody who has played in the sector. So that even if they are writing long essays that he will not be able to read, at least he will be able to look at the executive summary and know what is wrong, what should be done, and what should not be done.
Okay, let's speak to the minister being in advisory capacity to the president, like you said.
Yeah.
What happens when you have a position that is a bit contrary to what your president believes, and you think it is in the better interest of the country? To whom do you owe your allegiance? To the country or to the president? Because two cannot work except they agree.
Yeah, I think that's very simple. In other climes, what people do is that if you cannot fit into the philosophy of your principal, you resign. Okay. That's the way to go. That's the way to go.
Then it means you are not trusted as an advisor in the first place.
No. It's not a matter of trust. You see, but it's also a very difficult challenge for us here in Nigeria. Earlier on in the studio, you have outlined the provision of the Constitution that say, oh, ministers should come from different states. Now, because of this balancing, the president can't know everybody in the state. So he also will need to rely on some people, especially his party structure, in various states to produce people who are competent enough to drive the process. Now, you can see the horse trading going on. The real reason that this ministerial list has spent up to this moment to come out is because of the difficulty in arriving at consensus at state level, who should represent the states in the cabinet. Because that's not the president's prerogative. It is the party structure in the state that determines who will represent us at the cabinet. Now, in most of the states, there are factions. So you have a faction who is loyal to the president, and you have a faction who is anti-president. Because, of course, the wounds that came with the primary has not healed.
It has not.
So this is issues, and this is what's actually affecting. Now, the president has a responsibility to build a party. In other words, to unite the various factions in the party. Now, this also has to reflect in the appointment. This is why you are seeing the whole lot of delay. Because you have to work around this dynamism to be able to produce a cabinet that will help you unite your party at first. Because again, you also have an election to win in 2027.
Quickly, let's look at health. We talked about the resident Association of Resident Doctors going on strike. So what should the incoming Minister of Health be looking at? What are the things to handle as it concerns the health ministry in Nigeria?
As briefly as possible, if we can.
Health ministry.
Yes.
You know, we have just spoken about doctors going on strike, yes, and this is fundamental. You see, one of the big challenges that the health ministry has faced over the years is because of the unique nature of that ministry, where the medical doctors are saying, oh, we are the most important. The pharmacy says we are equally important. The nurses are saying, no, without us you cannot work. And then, of course, you also have those who are in the medical science and the rest of it who are also functional in that thing. So the struggle between these various unions and associations within the health sector is a very difficult nut to crack. And you really need somebody who will be able to manage this diversity. Because if the resident doctor drop their two today because you have met their need, they say, oh, because the minister is a medical doctor, that's why he's attending to them. Then those who are in the medical lab category will down to. So you need an expert negotiator to be in charge of the Ministry of Health.
All right, Nigerians can't wait for the list to be finally out. And I know we will come back to this issue when we have the list out fully. Okay, the show is still Early Exchange on Soup News. We'll go on a very short break now. And when we return, we'll look at the gig economy. People are making tons of money worldwide from the gig economy. What is it about, and how can you be a player, not just an observer, in the gig economy? This and many more we will discuss when we're back. Stay.
Gig workers contribute significantly to the economy by providing flexibility. But they face challenges like job insecurity and limited benefits. The future of gig work depends on regulatory reforms, technological advancement, and collective effort for a more equitable gig economy. According to some respondents, addressing challenges and embracing opportunity is crucial for a prosperous future of work. The gig economy has emerged as a significant component of the modern workforce, transforming the traditional employment space. Gig workers, also known as independent contractors, freelancer or on-demand workers, participate in short-term or project-based work arrangements through digital platforms or directly with clients. This workforce exhibits diverse characteristics, including individuals seeking flexible work arrangements, students, retirees, or those supplementing their primary income. Many gig workers possess specialized skills in technology, creative industries, and personal services, using digital platforms to connect with clients, and some secure multiple streams of income. According to some respondents, gig workers are essential people who make positive impact by making daily activities easier.
This kind of inculcation, we have different persons being relieved of stresses that might be, too much for them on a normal day. Okay, let's take for instance, you have a restaurant and I have a bike or dispatch riders. I can as well just send them over, so instead of stressing you or making you think of how you're going to deliver your goods to your customers, your client, and all of that together. So that way, my dispatch rider is going to relieve you of that stress of having to worry how to transport your goods to your clients. You get.
Company can hire IT from outside to come if their IT personnel is not available on site, and it will make the daily activities to run easily, and it has impact positively.
Help in saving time, which you use in getting, let's say for instance a permanent staff, someone that you need to train on that particular job. But once you get the gig worker who already has an experience of what to do, that person will be ready to provide solution for you on time.
One significant challenge noted by some respondents is the lack of proper legal protection for gig workers in many parts of the world, potentially leaving them vulnerable to exploitation. However, these gig workers are considered independent contractors without specific legal protections, facing challenges such as competition with traditional taxi drivers, ban of motorcycle taxes, public safety concerns, increased fuel prices, high taxes, and allegations of poor treatment by ride-hailing companies.
Anything for anyone's protection is actually a good thing. You get. So if it's going to actually foster a workable or ethical environments for every field, then yeah, they should, basically.
Government can implement regulation in the sense that if there is any negative impact on the side of the gig workers, they can actually implement a law that will guide and protect them in the act of dispersing their daily activities, routine activities.
A proper consideration of regulatory reforms to address gig workers' rights, employment classification, and access to benefits, technological advancement such as artificial intelligence and automation may impact the type of gig work available and required skills, as gig work platforms are likely to keep evolving, offering improved tools and features for gig workers and clients. However, some countries have taken steps to provide gig workers with more employment rights and protections, leading to debate and close monitoring of gig worker activities by policymakers and labor advocates. The consideration of collective bargaining and unionization may strengthen gig workers' negotiating power in negotiations with platform companies. Grace Komolafe, Souk News.
Thank you, Grace, for the report. So basically, the gig economy is a labor market characterized by short-term work or what you call a freelance work arrangement. So I need to ask, have you gotten a gig recently? Before I ask Ayo if he's gotten a gig and what kind of gig did he get, let me introduce to you our guest on this discussion. We have Ahmed Jayola, who is a tech consultant and also an economic enthusiast. Welcome, Ahmed.
Thank you.
So, considering your portfolio, how many gigs have you gotten?
Well, can I answer on this behalf?
I'm asking because I like to think I'm your friend. I want to share from the proceeds.
He used to be a gig expert, kind of. I call him my gig man. My gig man.
I don't even know how to answer the question.
He's got several. I think that's why he doesn't
because
know.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure we do gigs anymore. We do terabytes now.
Oh my goodness.
He's a pro.
All right. Okay. Please educate us. What exactly? Because people talk about, okay, I'm a gig worker. As a matter of fact, the modern young man does not want to be employed by anybody. They want their freedom. They want to sit down on their laptop and make things happen and work for multinationals, even from the comfort of their homes. Of course, we know about part-time workers or contract jobs in the past, even before the advent of the internet. Because one would probably assume that it was the internet that brought the gig economy. No, gig had existed even before the internet arrived. They call them contract workers here and there, part-time workers. But when the internet came, of course, it boosted the fortunes of the gig economy. So much that today we now have it that the global gig economy is about $5.4 trillion, and it is only growing. People are becoming multimillionaires in dollars from the comfort of their home. Please explain to us what exactly constitutes the gig economy. Who is a gig worker and what is a gig workforce, no matter how deregulated it is?
I like the way you ended it, from the comfort of their homes. They are primarily people that want to work along with comfort, without having the restrictions of I have to be somewhere by 8 to 5, I don't have a boss that is breathing down my throat, I don't have anyone that is supervising my work, I have the freedom, I can work when I want to, I can sleep when I want to, and I'm still making money despite all that. A gig economy basically is more, well, it's also called a sharing economy, where you share what they call it, work, basically. So you want to do a job, for example, you are not calling a huge, what they call it, a set of contractors to come and get the job done. You just go online, you just find someone. And someone that has, you know, some expertise in that, and you have a conversation with the person online. The platform, you know, gets involved in managing the conversation between you. You contract the person does the job, the person gets the money, you get your job, and everybody's happy. That's basically the gig economy. Now, the gig economy is a little bit broader than the definition. And the reason it's broader than the definition is because there are so many things that are happening in the gig economy that are not even accounted for. For example, when you say a gig economy, the gig economy has gotten into blockchain technology, for example, where you are now sharing servers, where you have your system that is probably doing nothing at this point where you are sitting down, and you have registered on a platform that is telling you that you know, you can register and then we can use the system resources, and then you are sharing it and using it to mine Bitcoin and so on and so forth. So the gig economy that you are talking about are the people within the gig economy, not the resources that are being tapped in the gig economy itself. So it's huge, it's very, very huge.
As much as the gig economy brings a lot of benefits, it helps people to have multiple streams of income. What are the downsides to this, using ad hoc staff in some cases, so to speak? Okay, so the downsides are split from the side of the person that is engaging the staff. You really are at the, should I say, the whim, you're surrendered to the whim of whoever it is that you are employing. Number two, the person could have your details. Take, for example, you tell somebody to develop your website, okay? And the person develops your website, and after developing your website, the person decides that, okay, I'm going to hold you to ransom, right? The people managing the platform may not, may be getting a complaint from you as a person. But then the best they can do is to delist the person. They can't chase the person. You can't go and look for police to chase after the person. And the person has already gotten the details that the person wants. The person has done all the things that he wants to do at the back end. The person starts using you to generate whatever traction or whatever money that he wants to generate. So it's more like a blind market. Like they would say, in Yoruba, there is a word called Oja Okuku. Oja Okuku is basically a market where what you see is what you get. You really don't have an option as to, you know, modifying and all that and so on and so. You don't have control, basically. So for you that is employing the services of someone that is in the gig economy, that is one of the downsides. The other downside is sometimes it can be a waste of time. For example, you engage someone and the person is really just lounging away, and the person is waiting for the time to elapse before the person probably starts rushing and just gives you something. Sometimes it might even be a substandard thing that the person gives to you. Sometimes it might be something that is actually looking qualitative in front end, but at the back end is rubbish. So there are a lot of downsides for the person that is engaging them. However, for the people that are doing the job too, the downsides are a lot. For example, there are no regulations guarding or guiding or protecting the people that are working in the gig economy. So you can actually do some work and the person that you are doing the work for has already seen, okay, so this is how it is, so this is how it is. The person can do a video recording and the person just goes, gives it to somebody that is his friend and decides not to pay you. Yeah, they will complain, but you've already gotten what you wanted. So it can be a waste of energy, it can be a waste of resources, and because, you know, there are no government regulations around it. And we're talking basically now about things that relate to people that are doing things at the back end. How about those who are doing graphic designs? How about those who are doing video production? That they will do it and then they will send it to the client and the person will say, okay, so I will send the money, and the person never does.
Okay, so let's look at how the gig economy has disrupted the traditional world of work. Before now, employers of labor would rely on people that come to the office every day to ensure that they get jobs done. That was an era when employees were feeling very, very important and indispensable. But with the arrival of the gig economy, nobody seems to be indispensable because we now have one-man businesses that are run by multiple workers in different parts of the world. One person might be in China doing your back-end design, another person in America designing your website, and so on and so forth. To what extent has the gig economy disrupted the traditional work ecosystem, and what are the implications for today's workers who are still luxuriating in the comfort of being employees?
The word employee is changing. That's the first thing we need to know. The regular definition for an employee is someone that is within your employ, someone that is collecting a certain stipend from you every month, that you have engaged in certain services. It's changing because even in the real world, the employee status is changing because you have a lot of freelancers now that will come into your office and will do stuff for you and they will leave. You call them contract staff. Right? So there are companies that run on contract staff. Now let's go virtual. Basically, it is something that is already taking place and there's nothing that can stop it. Because the truth of the matter is COVID introduced us to a lot of possibilities. A lot of youth today don't even want to leave their rooms to go for meetings, crucial meetings in the office. Because I did Zoom. We did management meeting from home during Zoom. During COVID. Why can't we do it now? Why must the pandemic come and tell us that it's possible for us to sit down with just a jacket and a T-shirt, and I don't have to wear proper outfits to be able to sit down in front of a Zoom and give my reports and do all the things I do? So the convenience that everyone seems to be after is the basis for which things are changing. So now you now have a situation where some people have established a process, and all they need to do is just get someone from the gig economy to do this part of the process, that part of the process, and it's really affecting job creation. Though you are creating jobs online, but you are not, you are denying people of physical, workability. So to some extent, it's not going to really impact the physical workability so much for two reasons. One, there are some jobs that cannot be replaced by machines or people that are virtual. Okay? For example, we are here right now and in Souk News, right? Mm-hmm. In Souk News, there are people that must handle the cameras. Take for example. And the cameras are being developed today are automated, okay? But there's a limit to the automation. There are some things that you probably want from the camera that the script that you're writing to automate the camera cannot do.
So automation will still call for human interaction?
It will still call for human interaction. Okay. So because it will still call for human interaction, and that is robotics, what do you now think would happen if everybody now decides that they are depending on the gig economy to run their businesses? Some certain businesses will fail. That's the truth. Because if you give someone, take for example, you're going for an important presentation tomorrow, and you send your, your documents to someone in the gig economy to do your presentation, and you have seen the presentation, and it looks so fine, but there's a mistake. The person in the gig economy has already logged out. You can't correct it yourself, because the person has protected it. What do? You have to go to the presentation with the mistake. Otherwise, you have to decide you're not going to use that presentation and you use somebody else that you can make adjustments to. So there are issues, that would always come up. It's not so much about the existence of the gig economy, it's about the functionality of the gig economy. Because the truth of the matter is, what are the limitations? People are still grasping it. People are still trying to get used to it.
It's an evolving market.
Yes. It's something that we are not used to yet. It's something that a lot of people are still trying to wake up to. Some time ago I was talking to someone and I was telling the person that no matter what we do online, we will still have to abandon the online sometimes to come physical. No matter what we do.
The gig economy is not just online. We have those who are involved in other fields, but they make use of freelancers, they make use of temporary workers. Mm-hmm. Now, for the temporary workers themselves, is it risky to be involved in the gig economy? Is it dependent on the network that you have? Because what if you're called for a gig today and until maybe another 1 month, you don't get another gig, as compared to someone who has a secured job?
So in the gig economy, there are people that are called agents. Okay, just like you have in the physical world, then you have also in the virtual world. If you are registered to certain agencies, most of the time you call them websites. Okay, take for example there is Upwork. Let me not mention names so that we will not give.
You've mentioned one. You pay for that.
Undue
you mentioned
advertisement. So you call them websites. They are agencies. Their job is to aggregate people that want work, and then aggregate those that are ready to do the work, and then charge a fee, and then bring it together. So what you said will always happen. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people in the physical world talk about job security. Job security is not available to those who are working as contract staff. Neither is it available for those who are in the gig economy. So you need to know the risks before you get involved, right? So, but to some extent, those who really know what they are doing really don't mind, because to some extent, you have something else doing that is bringing in maybe some consistent income, and you just need something on the side. Then you go into the gig economy. That's what most of these people do. They actually have something that they're doing physically, and then they have something on the side. But then if you are not careful, you are looking at it from the fact that this person dropped everything and decided to come online and come and do this and that and so on and so forth, and is working on it, and that's the only thing he does. No, that cannot be true. Because if that is the only thing the person does, that means that person is going to go hungry. How much is the person charging you? Or how, the lifestyle that the person is living where the person is, how much is the person living? So it's not humanly possible for you to say the amount that the person charged you is what the person is living on. So you have a case where the person might have to do maybe like 5-6 jobs to be able to survive. And the person doesn't have a choice but to deliver your job on time because he has to survive. Now, the question is, how many people can he deliver their jobs on time out of the 6 people? So you now start having a situation where people assume that the gig economy is going to solve their problems. Meanwhile, the person that is in the gig economy knows he's not solving anybody's problem. It's just his extra time that he's spending and using it to do whatever it is that he's doing. So whether we like it or not, the contract staff will still go to the gig economy, because you are seeing a lot of jobs that are going online now. You are seeing, you are seeing plumbing going online. You are seeing, drivers are online.
Definitely. I mean, they are the biggest players there.
So, it's quite big.
Okay, let's look at quality control in the gig economy. We said that it's an unregulated market, as it were today. Now, the idea is this: who determines when job is done satisfactorily? I know that on some of these platforms, they rely more on the feedback from the beneficiary, the one who is deploying your service. There are forms to fill and say, okay, this job is satisfactorily done. But then we have people with different thresholds of satisfaction. What you think should be satisfactory by your own standard as the supplier of the service may not be by the other person's standard. And so the owners of the website, like you said, who are the agencies, are the ones that stand as middlemen between the service provider and the service deliverer, if I may use that particular context now.
Yes.
The idea is, how do we determine what job is qualitative enough when it's job set to be done in the economy without personal biases? Because I may choose, if I don't want to pay, because they don't get to pay you the money until I say, okay, I am satisfied.
You're satisfied, yes.
If I don't like something, I may choose to punish you for undue reasons. People just forget things.
Okay, so there is the, shall I call it the wall of interruption, okay? The wall of interruption, as I'm saying it's not really called that, I'm just giving it that name. The wall of interruption is created by the agency. So it is required that if you are engaging someone in the gig economy, you must have an idea what you want to see. So, the person will probably ask you questions like, okay, so what does it look like? What kind of details are supposed to be in it, and so on and so forth. And there will be a sampling that will be sent. Now, if you are okay with the sampling, then the person goes ahead and starts developing the big thing. So, but in the case where, say, for example, there are some situations where there is no sample, because technically, if you say you are giving a sample before you get a job, that means you are basically paying somebody to photocopy whatever it is that you like. So, in some cases, there are no samples to follow. You just give ideas. Take, for example, in the application development market. You just give an idea that I want the app to be able to do this and that and so on and so forth. How it looks, how it feels is left to the developer. And it is left to how you like it. So when you say quality control still is put in place by the platform that is hosting both the user and the what do you call it, and the both users, because they are both users, but you have those who are engaging,
the service provider,
the service provider and the
consumer.
service consumer, basically. Yes. So the quality control mechanism is quite lax, because even though you've put it in place that, okay, so there must be some sampling, there must be some required conversations, and there must be stages of development that you must follow, and the person that is engaging you must be able to approve before you go to the next stage and the next stage and so on and so forth. Some platforms don't have that. They just have a website. And then they bring you on, and then they tell you how much you're going to charge, and then they tell you how much you're going to collect, and that is it. So quality control is still left to the platforms that you are on. And a lot of times it is left to the person, the skilled hand, okay, to determine, I like this people's service, I don't like this people's service, and then they leave this and they go there. That's another disadvantage of the gig economy. You can abandon a platform at any point in time.
Because they are nobody's employees in the first place. They're just there on the platform.
You can't tell me I must be there. I mean, if these people are paying more and their services are better, and they are even possibly offering maybe like 1% of the amount charged for insurance. What? Insurance? They're gone. because in the gig economy, there's no insurance, there's no backup, nothing.
So let's talk about specialization. How does the gig economy influence specialization and professionalism in work? Because it seems to be like, since it's a gig economy, if I get a gig, I do this. Whichever gig comes, as long as I have the ability to do that, but developing professional capabilities.
Okay, so professional is, what do you call it? We have to be careful using the word professional in the gig economy.
Or you could say specialization.
Exactly, we can use specialization. Now, specialization is the reason you are in the gig economy in the first place. If you don't have a special skill in a particular thing and then you register, when you're registering, you must show that you can deliver. So you must have shown that, okay, so I can do this design, I can probably do that website, I can do this application, I can, there has to be a reference to prove that you can do what you can do. So, but what do you call it? For people to get attracted to you or to your work, there is the challenge that comes to you that I have to step up my game. That's for those who are, what do you call it, the service providers now. So you have to consistently get better. You have to consistently step up, what do you call it, your knowledge base, your experience, your, what do you call it, in fact, your width of knowledge too, to a very large extent. And, the better you get at that and the more you, of course, share your work, the likelihood many of those that are using the platform will probably want to come and use you to do their job and so on and so forth. So to a very large extent, it also affects those who are offline, right? Because when you see the kind of jobs that people in the gig economy are doing, and you are just doing, the basics, and the person that is engaging you that is in the physical is telling you, can't you do this kind of job? Right? It makes you have to go to learn to do that particular standard of work.
That's very true, because it is assumed wrongly that those who play in the gig market are just very few. They're not few. It's a highly competitive field.
Yes.
To even get a gig, you can. It is easy for you to put your portfolio there, enroll on a particular platform or multiple platforms. To get a gig, your samples must have been previewed and reviewed by would-be deployer of your service.
Yes.
And you're being benchmarked against global standard. You're not competing with Abike next door or David next street.
Yes.
You are actually competing with the best of the best in the world. And if you are found wanting, you're going nowhere. You won't get. There are broke gig players, so they're very broke as well.
Of course.
Okay, but that's aside. Let's look at data privacy. I have a presentation to deliver now, and because I know that there is the possibility of the gig worker who can do PowerPoint presentation or keynote, as the case may be now. But then what the document I'm sending to him is of private concern to me. That speaks to privacy and safety of my data. I'm also sure that the one at the other end will be professional enough for instance, I'm saying a blueprint of an idea which I intend to share with a company across the internet. How sure am I that my data will not be breached and my not patents, my ideas will not be leaked to somebody that could probably take advantage of that? Privacy in the gig economy, is it a mirage or it's real?
Your question is like going into the market and shouting that you have something and everybody can hear you.
And still wanting privacy.
And you're still wanting privacy.
Doesn't it call for responsibility on the part of the person who
would set the yardstick for that responsibility? The government is not involved in the gig economy. The best the government can do is to regulate maybe some local content rules and regulations, usage rules and regulations. The government cannot tell you who to go there, who not to go there, what you can share there, what you cannot share there. It's private, it's between the two of you. It's a P2P thing. Right? It's a peer-to-peer thing. So if you take your well-worked and covert idea and you give it to someone in the gig economy and somebody else from the gig economy, somebody else requires the service of that same guy to do something similar to you, you think he will not use the idea that he used in yours for him? He will. You are only making him better by giving him that information. The problem is you are not protected because you don't sign any documents. Like I said, it's like a blind man's market. You are just basically going there hoping that the person that is on the other end has some level of conscience or some private ability to keep information private.
A sense of
responsibility. It's just by faith, right? Wow. Yes, you are calling on the hard work of the person, but the truth of the matter is, can you really trust the person that the person is not going to spend the exact same design that the person did for you? Will not send. Okay, so you are in Nigeria, for example, right? Someone in UAE decides that he needs this a design, and the person decides to just change the name, change the picture, change the color, and sends it to the person in UAE. How are you going to know that somebody else used it? You can't.
So let's talk about costs now. As much as those who are players in the gig economy, we're talking about the service providers, it's a means to make extra cash. What about the person who runs the gig? Is it cheaper to run a gig economy than having full-time staff?
Okay, so I will look at it from the area of crowdfunding. Okay. Crowdfunding is when you are expecting that, okay, so I want to meet this particular amount, and I'm bringing in as many people as possible. So the amount of people that come determines the amount of money I make. All right, that's how the the providers, or should I say this, the agencies, or should I say the platforms, that's how they work. They are hoping that a lot of people are going to register. So when they are going to have physical staff, they are working with people that can help them acquire more people on their platforms, so that they can have more services that they can make available to those who are interested in employing those services. So they spend the money to create that market, let me put it that way, and then hoping that they can retain both those that are selling in that market and those that are coming to buy in that market. So the cost for the person that is putting the platform on is a risk, because you really cannot tell if it is going to succeed or not. It depends on, to some extent, it doesn't even depend on the amount of effort you put, because Airbnb has been existing for quite a while, and there are a lot of platforms that have come out and tried to challenge that platform. Problem, nobody has been able to. So, when you are running a gig economy, it's online. It can be disrupted by anybody at any point in time. So a lot of times people don't invest so much developing a platform for that market. However, they put certain parameters in place to ensure that those who are coming on and those who are actually those who are coming on as engagers and those who are rendering those services have rules and regulations that they can at least have some semblance of control.
Ahmed Jayola, we must say thank you to you for that wonderful session with you. The gig economy is here to stay, and for those who still want to play, if you think you have what it takes to play there, why not go there? It's good that our young people have other means of employment as against working for a traditional company to really employ them. Let's say thank you once again for coming on the show. You're always with us and we appreciate your input. Okay, we are set for a dose of motivation now from Austin. Kerry, we should be the gap between this particular conversation and the next. So don't go anywhere. Enjoy this early morning dose of motivation from Austin. Okay, then we're back to continue the show. Thank you for the patience.
Turnover, which some people call gross revenue, is really vanity because it has to produce profit to be meaningful. So I say profit is sanity. But at the end of the day, profit that doesn't have cash is also meaningless. So I say cash is reality. This afternoon, I would like to discuss the concept of liquidity and cash flow and how they determine whether a company will succeed at the business they do or whether they will be sustainable in the long run. So we have a mixed bag of corporate and large entrepreneurs and medium and small entrepreneurs this time in the class. So it's quite a balanced class. But what is common is that many of them have no idea of a P&L, nor a cash flow, nor even do any kind of break-even analysis on their business. They just launch the business and they run the business. It was easier to explain the profit and loss because that's a bit more intuitive. When it came to break-even and cash flow, almost 90% of the class had no idea what it was or why they would do it. So I say that turnover, which some people call gross revenue, is really vanity because it has to produce profit to be meaningful. So I say profit is sanity. But at the end of the day, profit that doesn't have cash is also meaningless. So I say cash is reality. It's important, therefore, never to run out of money in the enterprise because if the enterprise was a car, then cash is the fuel that moves the car. You don't buy the car for fuel, but without fuel, you are not going anywhere. In the same way, you don't set up the enterprise just for money, but without money, the enterprise is not going anywhere. So how do you ensure a healthy cash forecast so that you know exactly where you are at each point in time regarding your cash deficits and your cash surpluses? Where there is a deficit and you have forecasted it beforehand, you can then mitigate because you could approach your bank in January because from your cash flow, you know that by July, you're going to have a cash deficit. That doesn't mean that the business is not profitable. It probably means that at that time, you are committed to a large inventory or some similar reason. But that could put your business out of reckoning if you don't have a way to get the cash to complete that cycle. On the other hand, there are certain times where you have so much cash with you that it doesn't make sense just leaving it in the current account. And then you take what you need to run the business and place the excess in high-yielding, maybe treasury bills to impact the profitability of the enterprise. So we just took two examples to illustrate this. Two companies get the same order from, let's say, a government agency to bring in technology equipment, let's say for elections.
let's say they both got the orders of $20 million each in January, and orders made up of servers and capture cards and printers and personal computers. So company one takes the order and gets a bank loan, LPO finance, to bring in the equipment, but his terms of trade is payment on invoicing. And let's say he's probably going to be able to deliver everything by September. So he's not going to get a penny until he's delivered everything by September. In the meantime, apart from the money to import the goods, he has what we call indirect costs, which are made up of his rent, salaries, and so on that are mounting that he also has to pay. So he just finds himself going deeper and deeper into worry because he's really running out of cash. Let's say the second company goes with similar order, but trade terms that says you pay a certain amount of advance, let's say 50% advance along with the order, and then invoicing will be on milestone. Milestone means when I supply the servers, you pay me for the servers. When I supply the personal computers, you pay me for them. When I supply the capture machines, you pay me and the printers. So he, in the beginning, already has $10 million as advance payment. That is impacting his cash flow. He doesn't therefore have to borrow money to import the equipment because he's gotten it from the customer. He probably even have enough to pay his indirect cost, which is his rent, and etc., and still have some to put in treasury bills until when he's ready to bring in the equipment. And then he brings in the servers. Let's say the servers are 25% of the value of the contract. He invoices and gets paid. He brings in the printers, another 10%, and then he gets paid. And in this period, his counterpart that got the same order at similar profit margin is incurring costs and high interest rates. And unfortunately, it's going to impact his profitability. And so we need to understand the difference between turnover and profits and cash flow. At the end of the day, people do not say cash is king for nothing. Cash is really king. And without a proper cash flow forecast, I'm afraid that our businesses will not succeed. And the same thing got to do with break-even. How much do I have to sell that I don't make profit and I don't make a loss? And if I do my sales projections and it's never going to be up to that break-even value, then the business is a non-starter in the first place. This is not a topic we can exhaust in a 2-minute video. I invite you to come to the Also Leadership Academy. It's in our interest to mentor entrepreneurs to optimize the jobs they create, because we believe that it's through that we can create shared prosperity. See you at the Also Leadership Academy.
Thank you, Austin Okere, for that wonderful dose of motivation. And I want to believe that you were motivated because I was motivated. Okay, let's talk about BRICS. The idea of BRICS was formerly BRIC. Oh, that sounds a bit complex, right? Okay. BRIC, initially, without the S part, was an acronym that was developed by a Goldman Sachs economist in 2001 when he was trying to, talk about developing countries of the world that he believed would dominate global economy by 2050. And at that time, the BRIC encompassed countries like Brazil, Russia, India, and Chinese. But at some point, BRIC evolved to become BRICS with the addition of South Africa. And so, between the 22nd and 24th of August this year, there will be a BRICS summit in South Africa, where the agenda that will be discussed is the interest of member countries. And just yesterday, we heard that over 40 countries are planning to join the BRICS alliance. Now, when it started, it was said to just be an idea that would not fly, maybe an economic interest of member countries. But now, with the daily increasing strength of BRICS as an alliance, it is shaping conversation in the global space, geopolitical discussions are changing. Now, there seems to be a particular challenge to the powers that be in the West as we speak, and we no longer can close our eyes and pretend to be on the fence. Let's not forget that earlier on the show, it also said there is no more thing like sitting on the fence. There is alignment. You're either here or there. Now that we have an African nation as part of BRIC, and even more countries in Africa are planning to join, what are the implications of the BRICS alliance to Africa as a continent and to our collective being as different entities of that continent? So we have a guest today who will be doing justice to the topic. We have Paul Frimpong. He is the director of Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, the ED in particular. Let me confirm, because he is actually standing by on Zoom. Let's see if he can hear us and talk to us. Good morning, Mr. Paul. Let's confirm. Can you hear us?
Yes, good morning. I can hear you
your
loud
voice.
and
Can you
clear.
please unmute? Or, hello, can you say good morning to me?
Yes, good morning. I can hear you.
I really can't
I don't
hear
know if
you.
you can hear me as well.
Okay, well, all right, please speak. Let me hear you, please. Good morning, Mr. Paul.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Is it better?
loud and clear. Thank you very much for being part of the show. We appreciate
great.
you. We are talking BRICS. It has come to stay. People say nobody gives you power. You take it because there is no equality in the world of power. The strong do what they want, the weak suffer what they must. Let's speak to the general emergence of BRICS as an alliance. Is this a new world power at the initial stages, or we're just seeing an alliance of countries based on economic interest? Let's have that opener.
Well, I think BRICS is going to be a very key instrument, in the conversation that has been going on in terms of the global power competition. First started off as an economic alliance, but now has a very huge geopolitical, angle towards it. And of course, rightly so, because in there you have the second largest economy in the world, in China, as being a key member of the BRICS, a key founding member of the BRICS. And the conversation about China overtaking the US as the world's most powerful economy has been building up for the last decade or so. And rightly so, it's anticipated that this is going to be the case for a while, that increasingly we are going to be living in a China world. It's more realistic that we live in a China world than in any other country's world. As we've seen in history, we've been living in the countries, world led by the Western countries. Europe first, of course, so many countries, Europe dominated. And of course, after World War II, we've been living in the world of the Americans, of the US. So the conversation about being, in a position where we will live in a China world is more real than ever. And then you have the momentum being built around the BRICS, because there you have interests of countries, some of the largest countries in the world in terms of population, in terms of even GDP in the world, being China and India, of course. And then you have Russia, Brazil, and South Africa. So in terms of population-wise, you can see, so this bloc, controls the largest chunk of our world population. So these are the most populous countries in the world coming together in that respect. So that makes BRICS even a more potent, avenue through which the reality of we even living in a different world that we are used to is becoming real. So for sure, I mean, it's a big deal. And now, as you can see, if you can track some of the conversation happening around the world, most countries in the global north are now running helter-skelter, because the recent development has actually accelerated the relevance or the significance of the BRICS. So the bloc, when it started in the early 2000s, when it was first announced as BRIC, and of course the other South Africa making the BRICS so that they can capture the African, side, it got a bit of momentum in the earlier stage. Then it fizzled out. Now it lost, the conversation about BRICS got lost in the policy rooms of these Western countries, and it became non-existent to them. To them, BRICS came with a momentum, but it has died out. Until now that we've seen recent developments, and now BRICS As you mentioned earlier, next month is going to be one of the biggest events happening around the world today because of some of the new development that I imagine as a result of the BRICS. And of course, you can track this to the Russia-Ukraine related issue, the COVID-19 issues about climate change, more clarion call from the countries in the global south about, calling for new, international systems than the one that we are used to. So all these rhetorics and all these happenings has actually accelerated the relevance, and giving more, attention to the BRICS bloc. And I think it's going to be very significant bloc, to be a game changer in shifting a global power.
Okay, Frimpong, there are different reactions towards the BRICS economy emergence. Some believe it to be something positive that will help the development of economic growth in developing nations. But some others see it as a furtherance of the rebellion against the influence of the West, therefore a global threat to the world order. What do you see it as?
Well, to me, I think it depends on where you are sitting, right? So if you are in a developing country like in Africa, I believe that having an alternative to the system that we're used to is very crucial. Recently, you can track some of the speeches being delivered by especially leaders in Africa of their disinterest or their call for new alternative to some of the international system, especially when we talk about a Bretton Woods institution like the IMF or the World Bank, and calling for a new financial, global financial architecture than the one that we are used to, that they believe it is not, serving the interests of developing countries. So if you can see some countries in Africa, including my country, Ghana, we've been running around a circle with bodies like the IMF. So we run to the IMF almost every 6 years. As a result of the kind of system that we are subjected to when we go for some of these assistance from these Bretton Woods institutions. So from the economic point of view, I think having an alternative to some of these solutions that are available at the global level, the kind of solution that allows everyone, irrespective of the size of the economy, to have your perspectives, being heard, the call for G7 restructuring, the call for restructuring of the WTO, the call for restructuring of the WHO. These are all economic related matters, which is relevant, and it's timely that we have some of these conversations, right? So from that point of view, if you're in a developing country, then yes, you might be interested in calling for alternatives, which must be available for you to have access to in terms of how you shatter your development journey. For some in the global south as well, for example, you talk about China or India, you might say that, yes, they have their geopolitical interests, of course. When the power is there to grab, obviously we know who will be there at first to grab it, which is, in this case, China will be a huge winner if some of these shifts that has been called for actually happens. But I believe that there's a pure economic interest here for developing countries, that we can have access to alternatives to some of the multilateral system that we have, that we've been practicing, that we believe is the kind of system that do not really put forward the interests of developing countries. There are so many of these systems that are there that we've been subjected to, that you will not find a whole continent representative on such, system. Meanwhile, we've been guided by the kind of rules and engagement being put forward by these systems. So it cannot be that it's only because some people are, now being disinterested or calling for a new, power shift. That is why, some of these conversations are happening. No, it's because of the pure economic interest. Let's pick another angle, which is got to do with even the currency situation, right? So we're looking at the conversation about de-dollarization. So again, this has two sides. So why you might think that de-dollarization is trying to more like hatefully damn the US dollar have been. If you look at the economic angle, it's brilliant, right? I mean, countries, if they are in a position to reduce their dependence on the US dollar, it's huge. I mean, we can all relate. You talk about the Nigerian naira, you talk about the Ghana cedis. We all know the level of depreciation that our currencies have been going through. And we know that the narrative, it's a demand and supply, right? So if you're importing more into Nigeria, you have to get a US dollar. In fact, even if you are buying from Kenya into Nigeria, buying from Egypt to Nigeria, you have to convert the naira to the US dollar to be able to buy from Egypt or Kenya. Same applies to Ghana.
All right.
So the situation about this kind of conversation is to see how do you then reduce your dependence. And some of these conversations that are emanating from this BRICS,
Mr. Paul,
what is happening, right?
Apologies. We'll go back to the talk of how BRICS affect African countries and what interest we are meant to have there if we eventually become stakeholders there. But let's talk about the implication of BRICS alliance even to the Western world itself. People are saying all the criticisms against BRICS alliance by the West is based on one particular premise, that he who must play God will never allow smaller deities to blossom. What should BRICS alliance mean as implication for the West?
I think for them, I mean, I think it's about levels of collaboration that has to be, they have to up their collaborative agenda. I think the anti-BRICS sentiment being shared by the West actually is the one that is actually accelerating the kind of enthusiasm that countries are showing in the BRICS alliance as we speak. There are almost 30 or so countries all over the world, especially from the global south, that have shown interest, including countries in Africa, who have shown interest in the BRICS alliance. So I believe that the question about the relevance of the BRICS cannot be something that they can put under the carpet. So it's about they having to show up and showing some level of collaboration in any level that they can. I think that would be the best option for them. This anti-BRICS sentiment being shared now, I don't think it will hold water in all of these conversations. And I believe that should be the position that should be coming from that. I think we've even seen recently that even the France president has expressed interest that he wants to even attend the BRICS summit. Of course, up to the BRICS summit people to decide whether they will want to invite such a personality at the summit. But for me, I think showing some level of collaboration in any shape or form will be a good deal for the Western countries.
So we have only South Africa right now as the only African country that is part of the BRICS alliance. More countries are indicating interest to join. What should be the position of Africa? Should it be a tag-along syndrome, or collectively African countries who are part of the BRICS alliance should hold a position that is fundamental to the protection of Africans or African interests?
I think that is non-negotiable, right? Right now, if you look around the world, and again, the BRICS has economic, implications. You have the economic angle, but then there's the geopolitical angle, right? And Africa, for the last decade, if you can track some of the new global, developments, what's happening, is becoming a very formidable bloc in so many respects. In fact, China's right to the UN Security Council was as a result of Africans' votes, right? And rightly so. I'm sure there are so many other, global, changes that will happen that will depend on the swing vote of Africans' interest, right? So that gives us a huge advantage in some of these conversations. So whilst we're late to some of these, alliances that happened in the past that has developed or generated some of these institutions that we are again saying that it's not fair to us, while we are at the fringes of it, I think for BRICS, we have an opportunity to be a key pillar, in the BRICS kind of alliance, because rightly so, when we look at even the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA, it could be a game changer for Africa to really see how we can position the AFCFTA in the context of the BRICS when it comes to trade within the African region. Geopolitically, again, we form a huge bloc, and some of the changes that are going to happen around our world will depend on Africa's, vote direction and our interest and our alliance, in that kind of conversation. So I believe that we have to be a key player, in the BRICS, development and whatever is happening around the BRICS. Population-wise, we are a key player in that respect when it talks about the countries, from the global south, and you can see the BRICS alliance is more appealing to countries in the global south than countries in the global north. And so, and we talk about countries in the global south, then of course Africa is a key pillar here. So I believe that we have to be in a position where we actually are the seat of conversation happening around the BRICS and any other changes. I hope that through some of these already continental initiatives that we've already been working on through Agenda 2063 of the AU, whatever key element in there that we're trying to achieve as a continent, we have to find a way to be at the seat or at the table of these BRICS with some of this agenda. We talk about the AFCFTA, we have to find a way to be at the seat of this EFTA. We talk about the currency, common currency related issues across the continent. It must be factored in and must be part of the BRICS initiative. And I believe they do need Africa in terms of these, in terms of the BRICS going forward. And that should be an advantage that we should take up as a continent too, so that we can be very instrumental in shaping the new global order.
All right, Mr. Paul, let's compare apple to apple. The closest alliance that is being compared to BRICS is the G7. People say that a new option must always emerge or will always emerge when there are deficiencies in the old option. Let's compare the G7's performance in the last couple of years to, let's look at how it has performed. Of course, it's an alliance among superpowers, and this BRICS is an alliance among emerging economies, developing powers, superpowers. How well has G7 fared, or how deficient has it been to call for the emergence of BRICS alliance? Let's compare apple to apple, like I said.
Yeah, I think that is fairly simple, right? So the G7, yes, they are super, power economies that have come together to form that. Now we have the G20, which also involves other levels of countries, which of course that even includes China, Indonesia, and other countries as well. But look at the G7, as you said, has been the one of the key comparison, kind of alliance in the world. Again, the rhetoric is very simple. We are being charted in a way that our voices are not heard enough, right? And this is becoming too many at the point. And so emerging markets, emerging countries, and the beautiful part is that these are all happening in such a way that joining one alliance does not actually stop you from joining another alliance, right? Because the interest, yes, looks similar, but then the kind of gains from any of these alliances is quite different, right? So, for example, if you look at the BRICS, they have what we call the New Development Bank, right, which is available, which is also helping these emerging markets, specifically in terms of infrastructure financing and all of that. So for me, the deficiency has always got to do with the instrument of power and who decides what for who to follow, and how our internal policies and our voices being heard at the table when it comes to some of these conversations. All right, so that is the bottom line, and that is why emerging markets are very comfortable and are showing much more interest in a new system that they believe gives them a level playing field than the ones that we are used to, like the G7. So for me, I think the question about getting the level playing field to be able to share your perspective, to share your own development journey, and fitting that into that agenda is the key changer here, game changer for developing markets. And for them, and look at the leaders and what they're saying, I think the BRICS gives them that kind of comfort, that kind of opportunity, that kind of background to be able to share their own development journey and be part of the conversation instead of being outside of it and being dictated to.
Talking about conversations, this one on the BRICS Alliance will continue after this break. Paul Frimpong will continue with you after this short break. Thanks for staying. Before the break, we were talking with Paul Frimpong, who is Executive Director, Africa-China Center for Policy Advisory on the BRICS Alliance. Now, before the break, I asked him to do a comparison between the G7 nations and the BRICS Alliance. So for Paul Frimpong, if you're still with us, can we continue the conversation? Hello, Paul.
So yes, so the BRICS, present, again, that kind of level playing field for those member countries that are applying to join the BRICS. I mean, you can see that their level of enthusiasm, their level of interest is as a result of the kind of opportunity that they can get to be able to share their own development journey and fitting that into the broader agenda of development of emerging countries, right?
There is no doubt
and so
that the
that's
BRICS Alliance...
Hello,
Paul, can you hear me? There is no doubt that the BRICS Alliance has significantly affected or impacted world politics and, of course, economy. But what will be the impact on other world unions, such as the UN? We also have the Commonwealth of Nations, and some of the countries that are indicating interest or will join the BRICS Alliance are already part of those world unions. What will be the impacts?
Again, like I said earlier, it's not mutually exclusive. Joining one alliance does not prohibit you from joining another alliance, right? So as we know, the call for new, international system in managing our world has been going on for quite some time now, right? So that shows that we are not calling for the total abandonment of existing international, systems. We just the call is to see if there could be an alternative to some of these, right? Some of these systems that we've been using. For example, you mentioned the UN. The UN has been since its inception has been doing amazing work, and I think it's continuing to do, tremendous work around our world today, right? So, but the BRICS Alliance can also be an alternative source of providing even complementary, solutions to what the UN has already been doing. The Commonwealth Alliance can also be. We have the Shanghai Cooperation has been doing. We have the African Union. In Africa, we have ECOWAS in the regional blocks as well. So, so having ECOWAS, being part of ECOWAS does not preclude you from joining the African Union, right? So it's that kind of, system that we're looking at, right? But just that you can see that the BRICS is very much so focused on championing the interests of developing or emerging countries. That is what it's appealing to.
Cross purposes, being that the agenda is quite different. For instance, the BRICS has the agenda of weakening or eroding Western influence. Isn't that opposed to the UN?
Yeah, I mean, it's not opposed to the UN in a way. I mean, I wouldn't say that the agenda is set outright to oppose Western influence. Of course, I mean, when you read the rhetoric of it, when you look at the geopolitical angle, then yes. I mean, I mentioned earlier about the de-dollarization, which of course is geared towards, we're talking about intensifying increase in trade among the BRICS member countries, which is of course also alienate the Western influence of a sort. And it's obvious that this influence of trying countries' interest in trying to wean themselves off so much of Western influence, it's not something that can be imposed. It's by the member countries themselves. So if Ghana feels that we've been controlled or dominated so much, for all these decades by Western countries, we believe we need a breathing space, and for that matter, we want to join the BRICS, then it's up to Ghana to decide, right? So it cannot be that, weaning yourself so much away from the Western influence is a bad thing. It's not. It's a member country's, decision to make. And the UN itself is also not set up to put the influence of Western countries on any country around the world. It's a united system for everyone. It's trying to help shape our world, the future of our world, the current and future of our world together. So there's no way the UN is also set up to sort of put the influence of Western countries on the world. No, it's set up for the world. But of course, the deficiencies in there actually, point to the fact that there's too much of Western influence, around our world today. So for me, I think it's for member countries to decide whether their interest is to wean themselves off Western influence, or they're in for the economic gain, for the economic interest, and all of it. So I think that's where the conversation can be tilted towards, right?
Okay,
that
Mr.
the UN
Paul.
system is not influence or
Apologies to
impose
cutting.
certain standards on the world, but then, of course, to help shape our world.
All right, just hold it there for the moment. Let me ask our in-house analyst, Idausa. It is one thing for African countries to be part of the BRICS alliance, but what are we going there to do? What do we go to the table with? Are we going to the table cap in hand or with the begging bowl? What do we have to offer as African nations joining BRICS alliance if we are even admitted in the first place?
You see, that's the real challenge that those who want to be part of the alliance need to really answer. You see, you can't go into an alliance without a definite purpose in mind on what exactly you want. And we know, especially among the BRICS, that China has a specialty, India has specialty, Brazil has specialty, where they have core competence and they can actually do trade and they have the market. So these people are looking for market, and African, of course, has always been the grazing field for world powers. So what are we going to the table with? If you are going to make an alliance with another person, you see, you should be negotiating maybe on equal terms. What product of Africa, for example, will be allowed into China? Or is it just open the door to China? Many of African countries are already indebted to China. These are issues. Now, what power do BRICS command in terms of even to defend its member? It's another very serious issue. We are already seeing the failure of NATO, not able to protect even its own in terms of the Russia-Ukraine war. NATO has not been able to effectively deter Russia. Nobody thought that this war would have lasted for 10 months. But we are 10 months still counting. So these are the real issue. Yes, multilateralism is something that should be encouraged. But we must understand that these bigger nations, they are not coming in here to really see you grow. They're also looking at things that they can pick from you. So if many African nations are actually urging to be part of this, then they must be able to get to that table to negotiate sufficiently to really gain advantage for itself. Because the whole essence is how you can actually extend your domestic policy to other space so that your people themselves prosper.
Okay, speaking about going to the table with something that is meaningful in hand, let me ask Mr. Paul, because he is the ED of Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, as we introduced him now. Many African nations are indebted to China already. And you're talking about forming alliance. It should be an alliance among equals. It also just said that when you look at Brazil, you look at Russia, you look at India, you look at China, they have almost equal strengths on that particular table. But that can be said of African countries who are indebted to China. A lot of us are. Now, how do we talk about alliance when one nation or when some member nations are already stronger by default, even before the beginning of the alliance? What do you think that would be? That would be unequal alliance, don't you think?
Well, I mean, it's rightly so. I mean, obviously, when you track, the BRICS economies, of course, these are the big guys. When you talk about emerging markets, South Africa came in because, of course, then they have access to the African bloc as well. It's a very valid question to ask. And for us at the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, what we've been advocating for is that we believe that it's best Africa's best foot forward in the BRICS has to be the one that is done at the bloc level. So we are recommending, for example, if Ghana and Nigeria and Ivory Coast and any other countries for that matter will be interested, I'm sure Nigeria has already expressed interest, right, in the BRICS. I think the best way forward is to actually engage even from the sub-regional bloc point of view, for example, the ECOWAS region, right? Because I believe that presenting that kind of economy, the size of ECOWAS, will be a very good game changer in terms of what these countries can actually, have on the table, right? But then one interesting fact here about the BRICS is that even though the size of the country in terms of the economy, in terms of the population-wise, in terms of the level of control that they have, as you rightly mentioned, China has been a very dominant country in the African continent in so many angles within the last 2 or 3 decades, right? Even though there's that kind of size, but if you read the kind of policy implementation program of the BRICS, if you look at their laid down means of engagement, right? They more or so sort of to engage all member countries at a level where everybody's voice matters, right? So, and that is very key for some of these rhetorics, as you can track in trying to say that the BRICS is more potent for developing countries. It's as a result of this, and it's a very important factor here, to be a part of an alliance that will listen to your voice, that you have a seat at the table is very key, for most of these countries in the sub-region. And rightly so, for countries in Africa. I mean, if you look at the earlier assessment that I made, that we are in a China world, we are going to be living increasingly more so, very realistically in a China world, and China being an instrumental member of the BRICS, of course, it's sort of aligns with where the future is going, that you want to also be a part of a group that will eventually, be in a controlling seat of our world, in the next few centuries, decades, ahead of us. So it is very significant kind of engagement that we need to be looking at for Africa. But going in as a bloc, in that respect, for me, it's very key, whichever angle that we're looking at. And I'm sure as more countries in Africa expresses interest in the BRICS, that conversation can be taken up at the African Union level, where some of our continent-wide initiative, like I just mentioned earlier, the BRICS. In fact, even recently launched what we call the Pan-Africa Payments, the PAPs, which are some of the largest, multilateral banks in the continent being involved in terms of currency and payment and all of that. All these initiatives can be factored in when we go to the table on the BRICS. And I think from that angle, we'll be in a better position to be able to negotiate better for member countries, around the table with some of these huge countries, as we mentioned earlier, at the BRICS level. And so for me, I think this alliance is very significant for Africa, and we have to take advantage of it. I mean, as written, when the BRICS was announced in early 2000, their global share of global GDP was on 16 trillion. Right now, they've surpassed that of the G7 in recent numbers that has come out. That the BRICS member can just these 5 countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, the growth has surpassed that of the G7 for the first time. So I believe it's a very significant bloc. And looking at their modus operandi, which is about the voices of developing and emerging markets, which largely involves the whole of African continent, I believe it's an opportunity for us to be there and for us to leverage on our significance as the global changing order and be able to negotiate better for our member countries who are joining the BRICS.
All right, now let's look at the leadership structure of the BRICS. What kind of structure is in place to ensure that there is equitable contribution in terms of decision making and is transparent and fair to other member nations that will be joining later on, particularly African nations?
I think we're going to be witnessing a bit of structural change in terms of leadership of the BRICS nations. As of now, it's been rotating. They are rotating the leadership of the BRICS equally among the 5 founding members. Currently, it's South Africa, which is why it's been the one hosting the BRICS summit this year in August. So, and now, I'm sure one of the key things on the agenda of the BRICS summit going into this year's BRICS summit is about the means of admitting new members into the BRICS alliance. And I believe that from that angle, we are going to then be seeing new structural changes in terms of the BRICS. For now, it's equal among the countries. China has the same leadership authority as South Africa. South Africa has the same leadership authority as Brazil, as India, as South Africa, as I said earlier. So for that angle, I mean, of course, this is rotating just between just only 5 countries. So now we are yet to see how it's going to be, but obviously it's going to change significantly, and I'm sure there are going to be other new roles that they're going to create, within the structure, because as more members are joining the alliance, there's going to be other because, for example, in a year we have just every year, imagine they're going to say that every year we're going to have a member country leading the BRICS, and you have about 50 countries joining. That means that it's going to, if you become a leader of BRICS for 1 year, it's going to take another 50 years to become a leader again, according to the current leadership structure that they have. So I believe that is going to change a bit, where there will be other, structures that are going to be put in place to ensure that all member countries, whether you are now the leader of the BRICS or otherwise, you are still going to play a very significant role in that respect. I believe that once they agree, that they're going to accept new members, which is what they've shown. They've shown that there's a possibility of admitting these new members into the BRICS alliance. And obviously, we're going to be witnessing structure change in terms of leadership. And I believe that when that happens, then we can be able to interrogate to see how feasible and how equitable that leadership structure is.
All right.
Especially when we look at
Mr.
Africa.
Paul, it will be assumed that BRICS will be an independent alliance of nations of similar interest. But when you look at the fact that President Putin diplomatically pulled out of the South African summit, largely because of the influence of NATO and the EU, because he is declared wanted for human rights violation with respect to the Ukraine war. How well do you think BRICS is, even when the EU and NATO still have a measure of control over it? Because if they are strong enough to disallow Putin, quote and unquote, from attending that summit in South Africa, do you really think that BRICS has that independence it deserves as an alliance of countries meant to challenge the superpowers, as it were?
So the first point on this is that we must also recognize the level of how entrenched, because we entrenched some of these existing global order has been for centuries, right? And so changing that narrative, changing that position, as we've been discussing about the shift in global power, it's equally going to take a while, right? So while the BRICS are making some gains in recent times, in recent past, accelerated by the level of interest expressed by a number of countries to join the BRICS. These are significant gains, giving them more geopolitical power here and there, especially in the global south. It's very significant. But then we have to know that they are facing an entrenched system that has been there for centuries, right? That has been guiding a global system for a while. So, for example, South Africa is part, is a signatory to the Rome Statute, which how do you put it, even restrict, or which gets South Africa in a position where they have to arrest anyone declared wanted by the International Criminal Court, the ICC, right? Because it is a signatory to that. And remember, these signatories were signed because South Africa also had its own gains in terms of what it stands to gain by being a signatory to the Rome Statute. And fortunately or unfortunately, being the host, they are now locked up in that kind of alliance that they have to be able to. They couldn't have enough time to be able to pull out of that statute to allow them to host anyone in the country without what do you call it? Abusing that kind of obligation that they're obliged to do. So for me, I think it's very significant that we appreciate the level of entrenchment that we have at hand, the kind of system that the BRICS is coming against. So there will be challenges, and this is one of them, right? Where a member country of the BRICS, because of some other alliance or some signatures they are blocked. So that is the kind of situation that we find ourselves. But it's going to take a while, and I believe that some of these things.
Quickly before we go, with the situation between NATO and BRICS, are we not heading towards the emergence of a two-power bloc?
I believe that the NATO deficiencies, I think it's clear for everybody to see. And I was very happy that earlier we saw African leaders, for the first time, being at the forefront of trying to negotiate peace deal, not in Africa, not in Middle East, not in Asia, but in Europe, right? Which is very significant. That speaks to the level of enthusiasm, the level of confidence that leaders in emerging markets are having. So I believe that the BRICS alliance is very key, to help resolve some of these, issues that do not even consider the opinion or the ideas of developing countries as if it doesn't matter. So for me, NATO and other, existing institutions, they must find a way to collaborate with some of these emerging development. And I believe that while they'll be challenging at first, as Russia, President Putin ability to attend because of South Africa's role in the Rome Statute and all of that, I believe that some of these challenges will come over time, and that can give you a game changer.
Thank you very much. You just mentioned time, and it happens that we're out of time on this discussion. Thank you very much, Paul Frimpong, Executive Director, Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, for talking to us about the BRICS Alliance. And that's the show. Thank you very much, the Director of Policy and Research, ADSC, Idaosa Osamanze, for being on the show with us today. I am Blessing AHA. Tomorrow will be another time.
And without viewers, there can be presenters. We're here because we're sure you are there. We did it together today. Tomorrow, let us do it together. I'll see you. Bye-bye.